And some butter.
I did not know these things.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone could take a seat, please. Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Scio Township Board of Trustees. However, we are holding it on an irregular date, which is Thursday, February 29th. And I would like to call the meeting to order and have the clerk call the roll, please.
Hathaway,
Present.
Palmer,
Present.
Flintoff, present, Brazo, Carrie,
Present.
Noel,
Present.
here momentarily, Riser, here momentarily. We have quorum.
I like that ventriloquism act there.
It was from the other room.
Yes, well, if everyone would please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Yeah, I know, I didn't even think about it until I figured that.
I voted. I said yes.
Well, the first item is the adoption of the agenda. And agenda is very simple this evening because our focus is on the budget presentation.
I'll make a motion to adopt as presented.
So we have a motion by Flintoff, is there support by Riser? Support by Riser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Communications to the Board of Trustees.
There are none. They'll be in the March 5th packet.
Okay, I know we had one from regarding budget that was responded to. That you're intending to put that in the March 5th packet.
I will. I hadn't yet heard back from Joyce if she wanted it in this one or the next.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That leaves us with public comment. This is a time for members of the public to speak for up to 3 minutes on any matter under the purview of the Board of Trustees. And I see at least one member of the public. Well, I suppose everyone who is here is a member of the public. Would anyone like to speak who is present here in Township Hall?
I'll just say a couple things briefly. First off, thank you all for working to respond to my questions, and thank you, Manager Parker, for compiling the list. The budget is 108 pages. It's quite long. I wish you all good luck in getting through it and coming up with questions of your own. I would say that the capital improvement plan, I'm glad to see it in this budget where it hasn't been in the budget for the last several years. There are some things within that do raise some questions. Specifically, I think I mentioned before, this roundabout on Scio Road, which it seems like the road commission's talked about, but not anyone at this level. Would like to move forward discussion about that, as well as just some of the expenditures, because there is over $20 million of expenditures in that plan, and we want to make sure we're prudent with our use of capital. Appreciate everybody's time. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Brian.
Any other comments by those who are present? In that case, can we turn to those who are participating remotely?
Great. Okay, hang on. Rob Anderson. Hi, Rob.
Thank you. As a representative of Scio Residents for Rational Government, I ask for 5 minutes. At the last meeting, there were some deeply offensive things said and some very misleading posturing that need to be addressed. Treasurer Palmer, you have always said that you are very fiscally cautious. Clerk Flintoff has asked this board to approve a full-time deputy. During the last board meeting, you expressed concern about spending more on staffing. You have also said in the past that you would have voted against several suggested salaries in the Compensation Commission. I am concerned at the difference between your posturing about fiscal responsibility and the reality of what you actually do. You were against the clerk having a full-time deputy clerk because it would increase the salary over what the current part-time deputy clerk makes. Your current deputy treasurer makes about $150,000 a year, and you are against a deputy clerk who would be making less than half of that. You say you're fiscally cautious, but there is a vast difference between what you say and what you do in this case. Why is that? Related to your credibility about your fiscal responsibility, over the last couple of years, you have made nearly $1 million worth of mistakes. And that's just the ones we know about. I find your opposition to the clerk having a full-time deputy clerk while you have a deputy treasurer making $150,000 a year extremely troubling. Here's another item you clearly don't know about because it's never happened. But one of the responsibilities of the deputy treasurer is to sit in for the treasurer when you are not able to be at a board meeting. There have been several occurrences when you were absent over the past couple of years, and the deputy clerk or the deputy treasurer never once sat in for you. Why? In the last 3 years, there has never been a board meeting where either the clerk or deputy clerk were present. I mean, not present. I found your comments to the clerk last board meeting deeply offensive. When the clerk put forward the job description for the deputy clerk, you asked, "So what do you do?" Why on earth would you say that sort of thing to a colleague in a public meeting? In order for the deputy clerk to be able to sit in for the clerk, the job description required to be broad and inclusive. It has nothing to do with what the clerk does on a daily basis. Your insinuation that the clerk is lazy was deeply offensive, and you owe the clerk an apology. I have a request. There are a few months left before you leave office. Please refrain from making snide remarks for the next few months. Several trustees have tried to raise the bar of this board and treat one another with respect that is desperately needed on this board. Once you leave office, we can finally have the forensic audit we've been asking for years and find out what has really been happening in the township. At the last board meeting, I raised my concerns about the $629,000 we're going to pay Carlisle Wortman this year. While I understand there is an effort to get grant funding for the 3 firefighters we need to hire, I think the need is an emergency and needs to happen sooner rather than after the grant funding. Please find a way to hire 3 firefighters now and not wait until after July. Remember, there are several months of training needed for these firefighters to become fully qualified. That needs to happen now. David Rowley said, if you weren't such an affluent township, you would already be bankrupt. I take that to mean we have been wasting millions of dollars, particularly on contracted services, for the last several years. Please think about how we can save money by bringing services in-house instead of continuing to contract them out. When contracting, please put services out to bid rather than just going with what we've always done. That's where we have wasted a lot of money. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Rob.
Jonathan Greenberg. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, this is Jonathan Greenberg, and I'd like to request 5 minutes as the president of the Rob Pattinson Fan Club. I just want to, I have nothing further to add other than the comments of Rob so strongly reflect my feelings. I'm grateful to him for putting them in such clear and concise terms. Well done, Rob.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And is this?
In that case, let's move on to approval of minutes. We have minutes for, we have proposed minutes, draft minutes for the meeting of February 13th. Are there any corrections?
I have an edit
Oh.
to my own draft.
Sure.
Page 4, meeting with representatives of Scio Tax Sanity Committee. Good point was raised. That should be clarified what kind of committee it is. So I would offer the following. Meeting with representatives of Scio Tax Sanity, comma, a registered ballot question committee, comma, regarding fire department needs.
Okay. I have one very minor correction. On page 5, I suggest moving the word state to the end of that line so that it's with the chair of the State House Appropriations Committee.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other corrections? Is someone prepared to move approval of the minutes as corrected?
So.
Moved by Riser. Support by Brazeau. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Minutes are approved. Brings us to the consent agenda. There's just one item. Is someone prepared to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Flintoff, support by Brazeau. Please call the roll.
Palmer,
Yes.
Flintoff, yes. Brazeau,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Riser,
Yes.
Hathaway,
Yes.
consent agenda adopted.
Okay, that brings us to reports. Their reports? No. Okay. I would like to actually mention one thing. There's a lot of work that's been going on and leading up to the listing of the farm property on West Liberty. I'll have more details to offer in my report at our next meeting on March 5th, but that is imminent and is scheduled to go on to whatever you call it, to be listed on March 15th.
Will, there's something else that you please share.
Oh,
Culver grant.
oh, right, thanks, right, yes, we did succeed in receiving grant funding through the county. This is ARPA money that's coming through the Drain Water Resources Office. And all three of our grants applications, all three of the culverts received funding. So my understanding is that the time frame for that means that the funding will come through in a way that would put it on our next, not this construction season coming up, but the one in 2025. So it's probably going to have more of an impact on the, not this budget that we're talking about this evening, but the next budget. Any questions about that? Thanks for a reminder.
No, I'm excited. We're getting $55,000, I think, is the township cost for 3 culverts, which one would be over 100,000.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a formula that where the grant pays for half of the cost and the township pays for a quarter of the cost and the road commission pays for a quarter of the cost. Sure. So anything else? Any other reports? In that case, let's move on. We have public hearings and there are none. We have unfinished business and there is none. And now it brings us to a new business item K1. And I will turn it over to our township manager. Please introduce your agenda item.
Maybe sit at the tables.
Sure.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the proposed budget moving forward. And I've put together just a brief presentation, so I'll go through the presentation and then at that point, perhaps we can go through the booklet and I'll kind of talk about it in more detail as we look at the next step. Okay. Oh, also, tonight we have Allie Norris and Brian Kameler from Plant Moran. They're going to be involved virtually because of not being able to be here tonight to assist with any questions.
You want to set the time parameters at this point or expectations, I guess?
Sure. I was going to request that because we probably will not complete everything tonight, perhaps we could meet up to maybe 10 o'clock. And then after the public hearing on March 5th, reconvene with the budget discussions, if that would work for everyone.
That works. Are you proposing that we not go past 10 tonight if we need to?
Yes.
It's on the agenda for Tuesday, other than,
The fifth, we have the two public hearings and some other items, I think a planning item.
Yeah, there's not a big agenda on the fifth, and
Okay.
it's only 40 pages.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I'm just mindful of if we still have a goal of trying to be ready for adoption by March 19th. That we just obviously will be efficient tonight, but also have
We can
a
come in early.
potential for
A work session.
potential amendments if we're ready to make them on the fifth to start that process.
All right, let's proceed with the presentation.
Yeah.
Quick question, Joyce, do you want questions along the way, or do you want us to wait?
Actually, I was thinking that as part of the process, as far as the brief presentation, if there are questions afterwards, I can take those questions. And then as we go through each department budget, it wasn't going to be a presentation by departments just because of the time element, but to answer any questions that you might have in there as far as their budget. Okay, thank you, Chris. Got it up on the big screen. Okay.
And I don't know if people at home can see it or not, but that's okay. Just so they're aware.
There are copies on the table too as well.
Thank you, George.
Okay. So basically, I wanted to talk about the process a little bit in terms of what took place in order to put together the budget. We started the process in December of 2023 with a kickoff meeting with department heads, providing a budget packet that basically provided information on the assumptions associated with the budget, the time frame, and a schedule related to any type of support that they might need from Plant Moran. So that was the start date on the process. We also developed a budget review committee that consisted of our township clerk, supervisor, Allie Norris from Plant Moran, as well as myself. And so once the committee was established, we met with each department and their staff to discuss the budget proposal, their budget proposal with them in more detail. And then lastly, once we had an opportunity to review all of the information, I did reach out and meet with each department to discuss their budget and any changes that was under consideration as far as my recommendation. So it was discussed with the department. So with that, some of the budget highlights for 2024-25 include a 6-year capital improvement plan. It's a balanced budget only with the use of fund balance in almost all of the funds. Total revenue is $23,222,707. Total expenditures is $26,211,958. The general fund revenue is $5.9 million, and general fund expenditures $6.3 million. I would also comment that with almost all of the funds, because expenditures exceed revenue, part of that relate to capital improvements. In terms of budget assumptions, revenue and expenditures were increased by 2.5%. State shared revenue was increased by 2.5%. Property tax revenue increased by 5%. Health insurance had an increase of 6.6%. OPEB is calculated at 3.5% of salary, and the pension is calculated at 8.8% of salary. In terms of capital improvements, as we have our discussion related to the capital improvement fund, there's really 4 areas covered: the fire department, water and sewer, building and grounds, and parks, preserves, and pathways. In terms of employee positions, I would start by stating that in this fiscal year, we've had 4 positions added to the township personnel complement. The HR director, project manager, utility technician, and the code enforcement officer. Positions recommended in the budget relates to support services in the administrator's office as far as an administrative assistant, in accounting with the finance director, recognizing that Plant Moran may be with the township the remainder of this fiscal year. However, for the upcoming fiscal year, we anticipate the transition potentially around September of this year. And then in the fire department, there's 3 full-time firefighters recommended starting in September of 2024. The rationale for the September start date has to do with just the timing of the positions in terms of filling the positions. And then secondly, given the fact that the chief plans to request funding under a federal grant, the FEMA grant for firefighters is called a SAFAR grant. If we receive the grant, they would then be covered probably more than 1 year under the federal grant. And I can't speak for the application process this year because I have not seen the application process, but I do know and with previous grants, you cannot supplant positions. So if we fill the position and we receive the grant, I'm not sure if those dollars could be used for those positions that we filled. So that was part of the rationale. And then in the water department, there's a utility technician position that is recommended as well. The next slide provides information regarding revenue related to all funds related to the township and a breakdown of those revenues. So for example, 26% of our revenue comes from the general fund, 11% from fire through the fire fund, 7% through the parks and that fund. The DDA is comprised of 12% in terms of revenue. And then water and sewer is 19% as well as 17%. So that's basically a breakdown of how those dollars are allocated. The next slide relates to the expenditure fund summary, which is similar, however, is for expenditures, with 25% from the general fund, and that totals about 6.3 million. The fire fund is at 10% at 2.5 million. We have the Parks Pathways Fund at 1.6 million, and it's 6% of the total expenditure budget. And then water sewer, 18% and 19%, which is about 5.1 million and 4.7 million. The next slide provides information related to the general fund historical data. So looking at this, as you look at the fund balances, which is the gold color on the bar chart, in 2021, the fund balance was close to $9 million. And then as you look at 2025, or 2024, the amount is around 6 million. So we've seen a reduction over the number of years related to the general fund balance. The next slide references, the general fund revenue sources, which include, property taxes at 36%, state shared revenue at 36%, licenses and permits at 10%, transfers in at 9%, and then other revenue at 7%. The next slide provides information related to open space land preservation fund in terms of its history. And looking at the slide, the revenue is fairly consistent with the exception of 2023, which is in the middle of the chart. And is higher that particular year primarily because the fund received contributions through grants, federal grants, state grants, and local contributions of about $2.5 million. But just in terms of other revenue sources, they're fairly consistent across the board. The fire department fund history is somewhat consistent with the exception of 2024 and 2023. And I believe in that instance, we had a change in our accounting process.
That's correct. Starting in the December 2023 tax collection, it was recognized as revenue in the current year.
But otherwise, I think to a great extent, everything has been somewhat consistent with revenue as well as expenses. On the Township Road Improvement Special Assessment Fund, everything appeared to be somewhat consistent with the exception of 2024 and 2025. As I had mentioned earlier, Allie Norris is on our call, and I'm gonna have her just talk about what's happened in this particular instance.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hi.
Okay, so I think what Joyce would like me to speak on is probably the 2024 projected and the 2025 budgeted, where it seems like the Township Road Improvement Special Assessment Fund may be in a deficit, when in reality, it's not actually in a deficit as there is an offsetting deferred inflow.
And in fact, is it correct, Joyce and Ally, that, you know, because we've refunded, once we wrap up this fiscal year, this fund will zero out and we'll be able to close it?
Yes, I believe that is correct, Jessica.
Any other questions for Ally? Okay. So moving along, with the next slide is related to Parks and Recreation from a historical perspective. Basically, the fund has been somewhat consistent. I do know that as part of the discussion related to the 2025 budget, there's a number of capital improvements that are being recommended as part of the parks budget. And so that's why you see the higher bar in those areas. And then with the water fund, primarily the fund balance or the net position has remained somewhat consistent across the board. And the same with revenue and expenditures. So basically with the fund balance, it's been close to $20 million in almost all years. And then the revenue and expenditures have been under $5 million a year. The sewer fund is pretty consistent with the water fund, with the exception that the fund balance is a little bit higher than the net position is a little bit higher at $25 to $27 million. And again, revenue and expenditures are under $5 million. So again, just to touch on the process, what we'd like to do is have each department, come forward and talk about their budget in terms of answering any questions that you might have. And in terms of any board action that's recommended, it's recommended that any action related to the budget doesn't take place until after the public hearing, which is scheduled on March 5th, or at the subsequent meeting on March 19th. Thirdly, as you deliberate and think about making changes to the budget, I think it would be helpful to consider either, if you, for example, decide to increase expenditures in one area, maybe reduce expenditures in another area so that it's a neutral process and we do not increase the total amount of the budget. Or look at revenue sources that may or may not be in the budget where we could make adjustments there as well. And then I also just wanted to bring to your attention that as part of the budgeting process, we did include in the budget the requests from departments as well as the recommendation. And I think to a great extent, the only changes you might see between the two are areas where we've given further consideration related to positions in the budget. And then lastly, but certainly not least, I'd like to thank a few people like Plant Moran for all of their work in helping us put this document together. They were very instrumental in helping us get this done. And also our department heads, because they all worked very hard to put together their budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And then thirdly, the committee that worked together to hear the proposals and provide feedback. Okay, any questions?
Thank you to you, Joyce. We really appreciate getting a budget proposal to us by February 9th. So we have a lot of time to dig into it. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you. So with that, I think the first area for discussion might be on page 12. And is related to the general fund, kind of generally revenue and expenditures. And so if you have any questions, certainly Clerk Flintoff is very familiar with the fund, as well as Ally, Norris, and myself. So any of the three of us might be able to answer questions.
I actually had a question, not for myself to
Okay.
answer. All right. On revenue, on page 12, first of all, I thought the overall revenue assumptions were great. They seemed really fair. Question, page 12, 101, 191, 687, refunds and rebates under accounting finance for 26,000. Ally, I don't know what that is or if that should be there, just something to flag. Could you remind me?
I think it's just what's been carried over from what was requested no, hold on, let me check very quickly
Okay.
what that may be.
Okay, my initial thought is that should probably be 0, but correct me. if I'm-
Possibly. Let me check.
Okay. And then
Page 12.
And then another thing I'll just get my revenue questions out. Page 13. 101, 265, 667, rent income. That 12,300, I just want to remind us, that's the billboard rentals, the rental of the space for the billboard out off Stabler. And I just want to remind us that we have that relationship with that company, and it's something we should probably revisit from time to time about what level that rent should be set at.
Do you know if there's a time frame under any type of lease arrangement?
Yes, I'd have to look at what it is, Joyce, but I think it's coming due because it was the result of a settlement that we did in 2020. and I think it was a 5-year lease. So, it might be a good chance to renegotiate with that.
So that's.
Jessica? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just wanted to make sure I was looking at the right line.
It's that one.
Okay.
You said one more, Ally, 265, 667.
For the 101, 191, 687 refunds and rebates, we have a note here saying the township fee will be informed by the cap for DDA as is per other funds. It's no longer a flat fee of 9,800 for the township to continue to provide services. So that's what that 26,000 is in reference to. So if you do think that that needs to change, let me know, but that's where that
That should be
stands.
zeroed out. That should be
Okay.
zeroed out.
I will make a note.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
It's captured elsewhere.
Perfect.
So we can. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that should be zeroed out just because that's reflected elsewhere in the budget. And then,
Before we move on, so that you know that this is for the sign that we settled?
yes,
Okay, and not the rental of the top of the water tower, that's different.
correct.
Okay.
Who's living at the top of the water tower? We rent that out?
One with the ladder, yeah. No, we rented out, it's for use by AT.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then just a comment, Joyce and Ally, kind of a question, something I want to look at as we get deeper into the planning budget. Page 14, the 101-701 planning series and 101-702 zoning series of fees. They are increased a little bit here. I know that we are long overdue for looking at, our costs of service for site plans and everything. Both the township's direct costs of staff, our consultant costs, all of that. My hope would be that we could do that study, this coming year and look at maybe a new fee schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think I did send some information out related to sitting down with Carlisle Wortman to discuss a future arrangement in terms of a contract. And part of that process is really reevaluating fees.
Yeah, good.
Laura, did you want to comment on that at all?
Sure, I can comment on it or later or now, but yeah, so Carlisle Wortman, we've been your longstanding planner for over 20 years. It's been quite some time since we had a renewed contract. And so I've been working with Joyce on getting a new contract to the board for review and consideration. That will mean an increase in fees. And as part of that, we have a flat rate schedule that the township bills for our services when we review site plans, PUDs, all of those things. So the township isn't paying for that, the developer is. And so those fees, of course, will increase as well in line with what we would be charging.
And I would see, like, from the township's perspective, the pass-through fees to you are just part of the fees we should be charging developers, because we're not adequately, in my sense of things, may not adequately be capturing the full township cost as well.
Correct.
So-
So there's township costs, there's Carlisle Wortman costs, there's also OHM costs. And all of those should be evaluated together, yes.
So in the recommended budget, Joyce, this increase, Joyce or Ally, whoever we have, we went from 200,000 to 220,000. How did you come to those is that just the 2.5%?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And, again, this is really a plan. And once we get through the process of reevaluating the fees and the contract with Carlisle Wortman, we may need to come back and amend the budget.
Those are all my revenue questions.
Just, sorry, go back to, where was that again? What were those?
On page 14,
You said 101, 701.
yeah, do you see where it says totals for department planning? And all those line items above that say fees?
Oh, here, yep.
Yeah, and so I I just want to say, we've done a good job with fire fees, water and sewer fees. I know water and sewer rates are being evaluated, but planning and zoning fees are overdue.
Okay, any other questions?
I don't see any expenditures for Gelman in here. And do we need to call those? Or the fire, the fire.
Yeah.
Generally, it's come out of the general fund. I would propose approximately $15,000. As everyone knows, the site will soon be listed on the Federal Register. But once it gets listed, it could be another year or a year and a half before Gelman actually takes over, before the EPA takes over the site. And we might incur legal expenses and or expert review expenses from Heat. So I think we need to have that allocated.
Okay, I'll make a note on that.
15,000 across legal and
I think
consulting.
so. What do you think, Will?
You and I haven't really talked about it.
I know, we have to have something.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it's prudent to have something there.
Yeah.
There have been some ongoing issues where we've called upon
Yes.
the attorney and the expert.
Yeah, one right now.
Environmental consultant.
What we don't use, we'll just put back to wherever.
do others have questions? I have some other 101 expense questions. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, page 15 in 101, we call it general government or governing body. Just some quick proposed reductions. I know we're not taking action, just putting the notes out there. Codification, I think is too high. That can be down to 3,000. That's 101, 822. That's the process we use for Muni code, and I was able to bring those costs down.
So which number
What would you recommend?
3,000.
instead of 7,000?
687. Yeah, 3,000 there. The 101, 906, it's one account number we've always used for the printing, mailing, graphic design costs of the newsletter. That is adjusted appropriately, planning for 4 issues in the next fiscal year. What is not here, I had requested some part-time hourly time for a newsletter editor, presuming that the board still wanted to appoint Mary Gillis past the point of deputy clerk. So that's something that can be looked at. I had proposed, not to exceed 10 hours a week, most for, the website, keeping up any communications, newsletter at 35 an hour, which is the current. So would propose some addition to the part-time employee salary at 101, 707. I believe the 101, 707. Who is in there now? Who are the part-time employees under 101? Can't think.
Wait, 101, 707?
Yeah, 101, 707 part-time employees salaries.
So Ally, do you have that information?
Yes, let me pull up my notes for this. Give me 1 second. One oh one. So we did actually, that is in their current, that is the part-time for the newsletter. So that is what that 18
okay, so
is.
that is in there,
So
okay.
it's already there.
Yeah, and I think too, at our last meeting, we had talked about maybe sitting down with Mary, talking about the newsletter, how it's being done now versus whether there's another way to do it and just bring some recommendations back.
Sure. Yeah, it's up to the board to appoint, newsletter, so some support for that.
Yeah, further comments, questions?
I'm good on 101.
Any others?
Mark and I were just wondering, but it's just out of curiosity.
We have to ask.
Yeah, we do. Medical marijuana, $42.90. Is that something, we don't have anything for it, but how in the heck did that sneak its way into our budget from a few years back?
Well, I don't know why it's $42. We have a testing facility.
Yeah.
And we got the $5,000 fee when they first set it up. We have one testing facility.
We do. Yeah.
But nothing.
What do we test for exactly?
The quality and safety of the marijuana.
No, it's one of the types of facilities. That's a sanctioned facility under state law.
Is there a lot of testing getting done?
But that's not there's no revenue with respect to renewals or anything on an annual basis that brings in.
We probably could keep up with it more and probably should,
I
but
don't
we
think we have a
haven't.
single,
I don't know how it became $42. We could look into that and let you know.
And they don't have to renew every year or periodically and the revenue from that.
They do, John, and I think that's probably one of the many kind of accounts receivable tasks that we don't regularly keep up on.
Because
we
I'm
have.
being straight up with you.
No,
Have
no.
dispensaries here inside?
No, the only type of facility we allow for medical or recreational is the testing facility.
It's a lab.
And we have actually sanctioned just one of them. It's right down on Wagner. It's a lab. They were testing much
But there's
more
no-
controlled substances
No, it's for the party
than
after we.
marijuana before marijuana.
Okay,
Got it.
I mean, it's insignificant on the budget. I was just curious about whether they.
Kind of stuck out.
Yes, why don't we move on?
Yeah, sorry.
All right. So I think the next one is the
You're right.
supervisor's
It
budget.
is 420. That's interesting.
What happened?
I made a joke.
What was that, Mark?
Well, ironically, $42, which is 420, 420,
Oh.
which is the kind of symbol for pot is 420.
Oh,
So
okay.
ironically,
How do you know that?
I heard. Will hold it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so moving on, we wanted to talk next in the packet is the supervisor.
Supervisor's budget.
Yeah, there's not really much there, but actually Brian's question points out something that you may want to think about. It's not a significant number, but even though I have elected not to have health insurance, and that's why there's a 0 in that line.
We should budget for it.
Next supervisor may not make the same choice, and so there probably should be something budgeted for it for the after November 20th.
Yeah, I agree. That would be the conservative thing to do.
Other questions? For the supervisor's budget?
I will note that in the description of the statutory duties of the supervisor, being the secretary of the board of review was omitted. And that is expressly one of the supervisor's statutory duties. Yeah, oh,
Will the narrative be in the final budget? I think that's kind of a process question I have. Do we need to edit the narrative? Will the narrative be in the final or do we just wanna?
The narratives should be in the final budget. There's a couple of other documents that are not here that will be included, but I'm thinking the narratives will be in the final budget.
Okay. Then let's make that change. Make a note to make that change, Kathy.
Okay, and there's one other thing under the budget highlights. The salary in this current budget was determined by the Compensation Commission in 2023 and represents a 10% increase from the 2021 level. So is that just a general, what you're saying is that it's an increase, or is it applied to every year?
The way the compensation commission works is you probably know, is every other year they meet. They make a determination which we at the
Right.
board either accepts or not. But in this instance, that was the impact of their recommendation, which was accepted.
Okay, so you're just reflecting what they had voted on in
Yep.
2021. It's
No
not,
no editorializing or anything.
no, it's not like a cost allocation where every year 10%.
No,
Okay.
I don't
Okay,
think that's how it works.
No, I just wanted to clarify because the way, I mean, it wasn't mentioned in the clerk or the treasurer like that either. I mean, as far as the percentage of how much theirs went up.
The clerk or the treasurer wrote their own
Oh, okay,
narrative, so it's not, that, I think in each case, the narrative is written by whoever is the
got
department
it. Okay,
head. So that's why there may be some differences in the way the narratives are.
okay. I wasn't sure because it was Joyce's budget, so.
Right. Good
So-
question.
This may have just been covered, but I'm a little confused. In 2024 through 2025, the total expenditures are stated to be $54,187. How did that go up? Given the compensation commission makes the decision on this.
There's other things there that are reflected besides the salary.
Okay, the salary here,
FICA increased.
It's broken down on page
Yeah,
20.
there's a number of other areas where there were increases.
yeah, so you have part of the supervisor on page 15, and then that's where the salary is reflected. And then you move over to another page. Looking for it here. Then move to page 20, and then it breaks down the other items. So yeah, that the 10,000 or whatever, which that's the insurance and pension, whatnot. Yeah. That's it.
Can we move on?
So then, next department, 172, Joyce, this is yours.
Yes, the administrator, any questions?
I just had a question about the breakdown of kind of where the positions are allocated. So we've got one FTE, that's you. And then I think that half,
The project manager.
okay, is that 50%?
50%,
50% here.
yeah, and,
It's 40% for the project manager.
okay.
Okay, and, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joyce.
Oh, and then the, requested, part-time administrative assistant.
Okay, and I see that in the narrative page, and Joyce, I don't see that in a line item under 172. I don't see a
The,
part-time line item.
that's my mistake. We changed it from full-time to part-time, and I just forgot to add in the 707 account number. So we will reclass that to part-time.
And Joyce, what's the rationale for coding? And this is because we worked so hard on converting our chart of accounts and we were out of compliance for so long. But what is your rationale for allocating 40% of the PM to, administrator, 5% to planning, 5% to zoning versus like 50% to planning, just kind of something general?
So basically with, the project, manager position, total 100%. 50% is included in the parks budget to assist with project management there. And then 40% to work on special projects in my area and in other departments. And then with planning, we've had a discussion where the project manager will work with zoning issues at the front desk, which was something that our planning consultant normally would handle. That would be done by the project manager. And then also, there's staffing related to, the road committee. That's another responsibility. Transit, yeah.
And that makes good sense to me. The thing I wonder about is we look at our cost allocation plan. And an idea is, certainly the administrator is not something we cost allocate across other funds yet, but it's something I think I would like to recommend we do next year, that and or HR as an activity area. But I think with the project manager is kind of less administration and more, I just wonder about that. It seems like it doesn't fit as well in administration, which would be an area that we would cost allocate as it might, in like planning or roads or something like that. So just a comment.
Okay.
Shall I move on to accounting?
Oh, I did have one more question. The 10,000 in contracted services. We've had the contracted services before when we contracted for manager. What is in the proposed $10,000 in contracted services? Or was that maybe just a placeholder? And I'm looking at 101-172-823, $10,000.
I think it was suggested to just be a placeholder because I don't have anything that comes to my mind and I don't have any additional notes on anything specifically.
Because we have sorry, go ahead, Joy.
I was just gonna state, I think in the past, with, the interim work done by like Mark Thompson and myself, it fell into this category.
It did.
Yeah, and I think in this instance, we just put some money there. A good example, is with some of the extra projects that have been requested at different times. So we just put something in that account in case there is something that's necessary.
Okay. And I think of that 101-823 as sort of the catch-all. I mean, kind of TBD, because we also have 71,360 in there for potential contracted services. I just want to be mindful as we talk about trying to bring things in-house. Anyways, I'd just be curious for future conversations, kind of what may go into that 10,000 and if it's.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's move on to accounting.
Did you want to talk about accounting and finance?
Sure. Yeah, this is
Questions?
sure. Any questions? We have a narrative and a proposal, as Joyce explained. Still with a goal of moving toward a full-time finance director, enough contracted services for PM gap for that interim, as well as a potential of, other potential contracted services with support around payroll or year-end reporting, things like that, as we've had to do before.
Okay, Jerome.
23.
Yeah, 18 is the narrative, 23,
Breakdown.
yeah, 20, yeah. Thank you. So it's 3 FTE, and this is a area that is, part of the costs are recaptured through the cost allocation.
So the potential contract for the third party for payroll service is not something that we'll be deciding to do by approving the budget, but we're basically giving ourselves the opportunity to do it, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it allows for the funding in the event that there's an interest in moving in that direction. Yes,
So
but
that
in
is,
order to look at something like that would require board action, and we would request proposals and provide that information. But at this point, we're not at a stage where we want to proceed in that manner. The one thing we have found initially, we talked about it because, we were thinking that if there was a need to have someone to back up our payroll person, we could use a service. However, in doing our research, we found that once you enter into an agreement, it's more long-term. So we have to really be certain that's what direction we want to take.
But it would be a backup service, or it would just be outsourcing the
It
service?
would be a primary service.
Primary.
Primary service, yeah.
The next department is clerk. Are there any questions? It shifted, you know, we used to kind of awkwardly split salaries in elections and things, so some have moved back to clerk. I don't anticipate any special elections in 25. We will be getting a reimbursement in part for the presidential primary, so I should have that number yet this month. We might be add a little revenue.
Is that meant to say discontinued down at the bottom?
Where-
By May 1st, the board will continue the appointment of editor Mary Willis, or is that meant to refer just to her role as editor, or?
Yeah, my hope would be that the board would continue the appointment. That'll be my recommendation, that the board continue the appointment of
Okay,
Mary
I
Gillis.
see.
Again, her appointment as editor is separate from my appointment of her as deputy.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So that's all. I would say for this year, I am, at this time, opting out, Ally and Joyce, of the health insurance. And so we could, save some bucks there. And I'd be comfortable clearing that out.
I had a question for you, Jessica. What is this? You may bring a proposed records specialist to the Board of Trustees for consideration. Tell us about that.
Well, that actually, I think is less likely now than in December when I wrote this. But that, it's gonna depend on who I appoint as deputy clerk. It's gonna depend on the records management initiative that Chris and I are bringing to the board on March 5th. But initially I was contemplating, you know, really when we're dealing with a lot of paper, somebody with some records management expertise to really get all of our files in order. You know, certainly it's a pretty commonplace clerical position in many clerks' offices. So it was just a idea of where we might be going, but I think it's probably less likely for this fiscal year.
Okay, any other questions? Clerk budget? Technology? This over there.
Technology?
Have any questions?
I don't.
So, well, okay, the 2024 budget expenditures, 301,576. Why is that? Let's see. I gotta know, but now I don't know why.
Why is it so high?
Okay, ask that one.
Why is it so high?
Yeah, page 27 is the details, Dylan.
27, okay. You said something?
I was getting lonely over here.
Oh, yeah, I'll sit with you.
Here it is.
I just want to see some of the detail just to refresh myself.
I can speak to it a little
Yes,
if you would
please.
like me to.
I was
Um,
gonna ask you.
About 183,000 of that in fiscal year 24-25 is for the Drive IQ services, the project paperless. It's phase 2 of the project, that, or at least that's what we're projecting to occur in that year, is phase 2.
Okay. That's right.
So that makes up a large portion of the increase.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
We do have some increased costs with internet, speed increase and some other
licensing that originally Applied Innovation was handling, but we'll be taking over ourselves as we move away from them.
You know what I think could be helpful, Chris and Ally, is if you could please provide the board with just a breakdown, the detail of that 101-228-823 contracted services. Just kind of who and what.
Yeah, we have that. I can definitely get that for you guys.
Perfect.
Sorry, say that again, Jess.
Yeah.
So Ally, did you want to just briefly, if you have it in front of you, just briefly share that information?
I can get it in front of me. Just give me 1 second.
101-228-823.
Okay, so hold on 1 second. Okay, so
There it is.
in addition to the 183, there's about 81,000 of additional contracted services broken out to 32,500 for applied innovation, about 16,000 for BSNA support, 15,000 for Microsoft Office 365 licenses, and then $18,000 for Granicus services. And then we have an additional $4,500, which I don't recall exactly what that's for, but I think it's for possible additional services in the event of Chris's absence. And so all of that together should make up the 268.
Applied Innovation, we're still under contract with them until late August. So there will be several months that we may or may not have to. But most things from them will be pulled out here in the next few months.
That's great.
It's good for me.
Thank you.
Everybody else?
Want to move on to treasurer?
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I just had a question for, it may be for you, Donna, it may more be for kind of Ally and Joyce. When you budget for PTO buyback here, and I think I saw it in 206 or somewhere else as well. What triggers our budgeting for PTO buyback?
Well, in this particular instance, as part of our budget discussions, it was shared that there may be a departure within that particular department. And so if we know in all likelihood, something like that might occur, we can budget for it.
Do we kind of budget for it as needed,
Yes.
as we can anticipate?
So if it's unanticipated, they would be handled through a budget amendment.
Yes.
Anything else for the treasurer? And move on to assessing.
Oh, wait, go back to the treasurer. So the part-time employee salary. Yeah, okay, you can ask that one. But, so the part-time is, Nancy Colasanti? No, I thought she was under administration. Okay,
Initially, she was a temporary employee and so was at the discretion of the administrator. She was converted to
Oh.
permanent part-time, so is
that's,
at the discretion
Okay.
of the board.
that makes sense. Yep. Lots have happened, lots of changes.
Do you have a
Okay,
question?
I had a question. This would be on page 24. Under the narrative, treasurer. The 2024-2025 total expenditures, $301,000. Why is that so high? Because the prior year was only $81,800.
So Kathy, I think I can answer that, Donna, unless you want to, because I think that's not, Donna, if you go to the detail on page 27, I think it's the difference of the cost allocation. So maybe Ally for the narratives on any cost allocated activity areas. To just don't use the net after the cost allocation, but use the true expenditures. So the true expenditures are not so different, Kathy. It's about 301,000. It's about the same.
Well, there is a salary increase that will be reflected in that year per the
That could be part of it.
compensation commission, so that the treasurer's salary goes up.
Mhm.
So it goes from 81,000 to 301,000?
No, but
Oh,
Kathy.
no, that's not all on the salary.
Yeah.
So Kathy, if you look at page 27, so it's really like in the 23-24 budget, there's really about $300,000 worth of expenses. But we backed out a budgeted 220,000 in cost allocation. And this year, there's about 300,000 and the cost allocation is less, so there'll be less recovered. And I can explain why that is, but that's to do with cost allocation and not to do with treasury.
Okay, and who is the full-time employee?
My deputy.
She's full-time? Supposed to be full-time?
She is. Yeah.
Interesting, okay, and then part-time is Nancy and officer, of course, is you. Okay. But in 2024-25, that would only be reflected for. So when the new deputy, or when the new treasurer comes in and has to appoint a deputy treasurer, it's going to be, because if I remember correctly, deputy treasurer is part-time at 56,000. So when this reflect, because if in November, so that this would be half a year that we should be reflecting that. And then it should go down.
It depends. It's at the discretion of the treasurer and the need.
Well,
And I don't think, I
yeah, but the
will
salary set
disagree
by the
that
board.
the need will change. It won't change.
Well, I guess what,
For full-time.
if I understand what you're saying, Jillian, the incoming treasurer could say, I don't need to have a full-time deputy. I asked the board to put it back to a part-time position at the lower salary or whatever. But it would be up to the board to determine the time, that amount of time for the deputy and the compensation level for the deputy.
Well, not the time, because, but I just read something where the
Can I
board,
tell the?
yes, you
the
probably know.
History, so it was in August of 2021 where the board established the full-time deputy treasurer position. It was full-time. It was for a lower salary. You know, the treasurer made her determination to appoint the finance director as the deputy treasurer, and the board approved continuing the salary and benefits at that rate. So I will say, certainly the salary and benefits was specific to this particular appointment of this particular person who had that salary already.
Okay,
Certainly, it wasn't, there was no determination by this board that the deputy treasurer salary should be 110,000.
right, okay, so when the next deputy treasurer comes along, we're just not gonna pass the torch and say, oh, here, 110,000.
Correct. Well, I don't know what. the
But, no,
next
right,
board will do, but
Right, but
that-
it should reflect the
You're right.
lower.
It's up to the board, as the board of trustees, to make a determination about compensation level and time. Right? We just had that discussion with the deputy clerk position.
Comment on a part of what you just said. The treasurer determines the time needed by
Yes.
their deputy,
And
That's true.
we do the compensation.
whatever that may be, the board will have to deal with
The
it.
salary.
Okay, but my question here is that we're projecting into 2025-26, $113,000 for a deputy treasurer that we don't know.
Can I raise a question and make a suggestion for us on that? Because you raised a really good point. Joyce and Ally, that 25-26 projected budget, I think it's a helpful reference point. I want to suggest that as we go through this, it's nothing more than a reference point, that we are not adopting anything for 25, 26. Is that accurate?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on to assessing?
Andrea? Come up here and sit with me. Any questions for Andrea?
Andrea, just a quick question, and you may not be able to answer it tonight, which is okay, but you highlighted how much more field work you and your team are doing, which I think is awesome. And how much more mileage reimbursement expense line. Have you had a chance to kind of look at all at how much mileage reimbursement there is, you know, with the proposed vehicle? You know, versus the proposed vehicle, because that's something I'm kind of curious about for all the general fund users of personal.
You mean a proposed vehicle for the township to use as opposed to getting? Even before I was the assessor, I always told the former assessor, it'd be nice to do that, because I don't like to put the miles on my own vehicle. So that's the benefit of that right there.
Issues too.
Yeah, you know, so I'm in favor of that.
And,
you know.
and having one vehicle, does that work for your team, or do you go out at the same time to different places?
It depends. You know, it all depends on what they're doing, on who needs finals and, you know, sometimes they both go out at the same time, sometimes one will go out, one will be in, it varies. It depends on the need of the work at the time.
So having a vehicle for assessing wouldn't eliminate the need for mileage reimbursement entirely.
Right, because I mean, you might get called out to do a final. I might get called out to do a final if somebody's not here and it needs to get done. So you just go and do it. But I think a vehicle to be shared amongst, you know, the employees in the township is a good idea. I've always thought that. Don't consider.
Other questions for assessor?
I thought you did a really good job on your narrative.
You
did write it, yeah.
This?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was asked to give something and it just came out of my brain.
All right, if there are no further questions.
Can go home.
Thank you.
Unless you want to stay and watch.
Okay.
Well, that brings us to elections.
Yeah, any questions on elections other than the additional small bit of revenue? You will see full-time staff line item for $6,000. I just want to be clear that that is, you know, the utility workers' time when they run out to polling places. It's no full-time staff election, but we wanted to fully show the cost of running elections and proposed increases on the authorized position sheet to up the pay of chairpersons from 20 to 22 and election inspectors from 16 to 18. And that would actually allow us to match what the county is now paying people. So you got to compete.
I'm just gonna make one comment, because I think it is warranted, that, once I figured out my polling place, where'd I go? Took me three stops, actually. I wound up.
Not reflect well on me right now.
No, I wound up at Polo Fields. But somebody there didn't notice, oh, you're a Scio Township, and I just want to make this public. I did it in a private note here to the team. They said, oh, you're Scio Township Trustees. Yeah. That's where they're going. And they said, hey, I just want to let you know, please tell, she called Jessica up by name, Jessica and her team, what a great job they did on the elections and how well trained you were, and we really appreciate it. So, hey,
Thanks, Mark.
do what it's due. And again, that was an unsolicited comment. She seeked me out. I should have got the person's name. I didn't. So, hey, at the end of the day, elections are the most important thing. That keeps our democracy intact. So to me, that's like number one. That was just great to hear.
Well, thank you, Mark. And
So-
thanks for the board's support for early voting and all. Appreciate it.
So the revenue that occurred is a one-time thing, or it's ending, or?
The revenue, I'll have a good number for us before we adopt this budget.
Oh, I see. So-
Yep, I'll be
so
bringing it.
This blank will be filled in.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, should we move on to buildings and grounds?
Yes. Buildings and grounds. So, a much, big budget. I want to start with some of the proposed maintenance costs and then move to capital. I'm wondering about the building maintenance line. It's recommended at 20,000 when we've already expended 24,000 as of January 31st of this year. Ally, is that enough? Why do we think 20,000 is enough for building maintenance when we've already spent more than that this year? 101-265-931.
That's a good, I think we just rolled it forward from what was budgeted. I can look into what is currently included in the 23-24 activity. Maybe it was like a large one-off issue that happened this year that maybe we wouldn't anticipate to happen again, but I can look into that further and let you know.
Okay, thank you. As well with grounds maintenance, that went up a lot. Was that the result of our outsourcing mowing? Or what was the driver of that?
Are you at 932?
Yes.
The grounds maintenance, yeah, that is from a discussion with Brandon during our initial budget meeting. We increased that for some crack sealing for the parking lot, I believe, is what's been increased for this coming budget year.
Okay, great. And then before we get to capital, I just want to flag Joyce, other township building maintenance, that 50,000, that's the barn. Did you want to take a minute to talk about the barn roof project?
Oh, sure. Well, we own the barn at Wagner and Scio Church Road. And there's a group that use the facility, and they have an agreement with the township to maintain the barn as a condition of using the facility. I think they use it mostly for storage. And they approached the township a couple of months ago requesting funding to replace the roof on the barn. And so, they provided to us like a detailed listing of all of the improvements that they've made to date, but they think the roof and the cost of the roof exceeds what they can actually provide. So they're in the process right now of obtaining 3 quotes for the replacement of the roof, and that information then will be forwarded on to the board.
And I just flagged for the board, I think it's a pretty barn.
Yeah.
It's cool. And I think we should have a more serious conversation about, how we can better utilize it or find another owner of it.
Yeah, I just took a class about public spending, public ownership through the MTA, and they specifically talked about renting. And it's really, I'll have to go back into the notes, but the barn popped into my head, and we really need to question that whole setup.
We need to go back in history and find out all the detail before we, get into a thorough discussion and decision.
I agree. And
There's a lot more to that than we don't need to get into that.
Okay, can we
Yeah.
make a note somewhere to revisit that soon?
Yeah, should have a conversation about that.
I had a question, grounds maintenance, Sloan property.
Yeah.
Everything is 0.
Yep.
That's fine, but how did that get put on?
That's an old GL number, before we had a parks department. And any of the line items where you see zeros, I suggest looking past them. Most of them are old GL numbers we don't use anymore.
Should we omit them?
Yes, that would be great. Maybe in the final budget, we could omit those with zeros.
But the question you've raised, maybe just so you understand why that even happened. That's the property on Baker Road, as part of Sloan, whatever, and that's where that all started years back. But now we've got, like we said, a different structure and a different, people like parks and paths.
It's a different place now.
So could we take that, do we need to have it? in?
Yeah, if I could just, maybe just ask for the final version, just take out all the zero lines.
And I think, you know, like with parks, in this budget, we combine parks and preserves and pathways. So in certain areas, you have a lot of zeros. So we'll take a look at it.
Okay, so $550,000 in buildings and improvements. I referenced the CIP here. Let me see if I've got the list right. A generator for 120,000, countertops or tiling for 50,000, HVAC 350,000 of a total of 750,000 spread over 2 years. And it looks like $30,000 of the camera.
Where are you looking?
Where are you now?
So I'm on 101-265-975. It's $550,000. So a big investment in capital, and then it's broken down on this capital improvement
Okay,
plan.
what page are you?
34.
34.
Okay,
34.
well,
It's right after the red numbers.
The highlights are on the
Okay,
narrative page too.
yeah, okay, so so buildings and improvements, and you're breaking that down to where? Under the budget highlights?
It was what was in the capital improvement plan for year one. So
Where is?
I looked at the budget and then the capital improvement plan. And is that the
You
correct
put it-
list
okay.
that I stated? Okay. So
Just there's one comment on that. It's not $30,000 for the camera system only in the building and grounds department. It's just a third of that, so 10,000. There's also 20,000 in there budgeted for a lawnmower, but it's not in the capital improvement plan since it was below the $25,000 threshold.
thank you. So go ahead.
Do you want,
Yeah, so talk to me
to
first
just
about the
talk about
generator.
what we have included?
Yeah.
So the generator, is, actually coming in closer to $70,000. I believe it was discussed earlier that we wanted to put a little buffer in there just in case anything actually happened. But the board did approve the purchase of the generator
That's
with the work to be done.
And that's what I thought. And Brandon, forgive me for not remembering, but I thought we already appropriated and authorized the generator. So I'm wondering why.
So-
Well, actually,
Did we not?
you did approve it. However, I believe it's gonna take about a year before it's
Gotcha.
actually available for us to receive.
Yep, we're hoping by all means necessary to get it in here, this fall, this coming fall. And so, yeah, it actually hasn't been taken out of this fiscal's budget yet.
But do you think 120 is still required? If it may come in at 70, or you want the $50,000 buffer?
No, the board approved, it was roughly $70,000 right there. I just kind of looked at it again today because we were discussing the Jackson Road Pump Station. But we did discuss at the time of the meeting, increasing it a little bit more. This is a decent amount more, just in case something changed in the process. It's totally up to Joyce and the board with what they want.
But 120 is what we approved.
It was 68 or 69 something thousand.
Okay. But if we approve it at 120, I just want to make sure we're not increasing an approval by $50,000.
I understand, just stating that, yes, it was, the work was completely approved a month or so ago, at that $68,000 or $69,000. And at that time, the board discussed increasing the amount, to a higher number just in case.
So you budgeted basically for a contingency, but the authorization from the board is still what we authorized.
Still what you authorize, yeah.
Okay.
They would have to certainly get with us before any work is started, if there's some weird reason why they would have to increase it.
Okay.
Well, but so Brandon, we're gonna replace all the, not the ductwork, but the HVAC units here in this building. What's the square footage of all the buildings collectively?
I don't actually know that. We're still looking into the exact way we're gonna handle this and bring it to the board. So
You know the square footage of the buildings, right?
I don't know this exact square footage of the old part, this older section of the township hall.
The reason I ask, I looked it up, like the average replacement cost is about $43 a square foot. Just 500K just seems awful high to me. I'm just trying to think.
It's a 17,270 square feet
Oh,
is
okay.
all of township hall.
And I think
Mark
to add to,
looked into this a couple years
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, I know, I didn't know it was that big. I didn't know it was 17,000 square feet.
And I started to look into it.
Wait a
We
minute,
only went so far.
I'm good. No, actually, if it's that, I had no idea it was that large of a building.
Okay.
That's actually, 500 grand is actually reasonable.
It's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
what
no.
I'm saying.
and I think,
Again, I said yes. Well, not, and when my wife does that too. I say yes, and I agree. She wants to beat it in my head. Like, no, honey, I agreed, I swear.
I was just gonna say too, you know, there's some.
That's my wife. That's my wife.
Somebody else has made that
Yeah.
mistake.
Yes, we'll-
Yeah. No, 500 is actually pretty reasonable, actually, because I just did quick math. That's like 750 grand. So,
Well, yeah, I think the total budget for this year and next year included is 750. We're speaking to Jan Culberson and the specialist that we hired in 2021 to do the actual study. We had a meeting with them in our sustainability committee.
yeah, your 750 is about right.
And, He
142,000.
gave us new updated figures for what it would be for just regular HVACs, what we currently have in the old section. A price for what it would be possibly for a, Kevin, VRF system. Thanks, Kevin. A VRF system, and then also a geothermal. And so we were budgeting to make sure we had enough money to get this project completed next fiscal year. We don't have any more information currently though.
I'm sold. I'm sold. We're good, man. Once I found the square footage, I'm sold.
Question on the HVAC though, why is it spread over 2 years? You got 350 in this fiscal year and 400 in next fiscal year.
So we didn't want to pull, maybe Joyce, you want?
Well, we had talked about doing it over 2 years because of the costs in total, other than taking everything out of the general fund at one time. I think the other thing is the work itself, you know, is according to discussions with Brandon and others, it's gonna be pretty extensive. So we may need to really plan for it in order to make sure that we're ready, especially if you're taking all of the duct work out and replacing that.
There's a possibility that some of the design work can be done this fiscal year. So we could, you know, we'll have a little bit of money there to pull out for that portion of it.
Yeah.
And then whatever we figure out what those quotes come in for whatever style you guys select, we'll better allocate and shore up, lower it or increase it for 2025.
Okay.
Brandon?
Are we ready to move on?
No,
No?
so regarding, we have one full-time person. Have we done a salary review,
At this,
wages or whatever it's called?
at this time, Joyce has requested it to be
Well-
done, but
Yeah, you know, we've gotten several requests from different departments and employees about wage changes. And we don't really have a system in place to do it where we can establish the equity internally as well as external equity. So for the upcoming budget year, we're gonna be requesting that we do a wage and compensation study that will allow us to look at all of the positions and look at the equity within the organization, outside of the organization related to other communities. And then also as part of that process, update our job descriptions and classification, set up a classification system.
Well, okay, because I know there's some employees that are way underpaid. And I want to make sure that, I mean, we have to wait another year for that.
Well, and the problem with just doing one at a time is the equity issue. So that's
but
why we
if
get,
they're paid under other employees, then they should be at least brought up.
well, I don't know exactly what you mean under other.
Well, like if somebody is making $14 an hour and everybody else is making 25, and their job is you know, it needs to be at least somewhat even and not wait till another year, because if we lose those employees, we're gonna have to hire somebody to take their place at a higher rate or pay rate.
I don't think it'll take a year to get that done.
Okay,
Yeah.
Shall we move on to attorney?
No, I do have a concern. Tile and granite countertops for $50,000. You know, as a policymaker, I can't sit here and approve that without a lot more information. Granite countertops for Township Hall, $50,000.
It's not granted, but,
Okay.
yeah, but, so it's not,
That sounds expensive, doesn't it?
so
Yeah.
what actually, for the proposed changes, those are actually, it's 33,000. And
So why is there 50 in here?
Well, I think when we started looking at this, it was a matter of trying to replace the towel in the women's restrooms because they're broken up and
I support that.
pieces are missing and everything. And then as we started really looking at it, then it was suggested that we take a look at all of the restrooms. And I believe the counters in the,
in the hallway restrooms right here.
yeah, in the is it the employee lounge? I thought there was something there.
So the tile in the kitchen, we looked at that to match the, or kind of be more, updated and kind of look like the rest of the tile that's in the building. That was a quote that we supplied just because we were getting quotes for the bathrooms being done. And at that time, I looked at the countertops in the hallway bathrooms here, seeing that those are outdated laminate. When you look at our utility bathrooms, they're chlorine countertops with tile flooring. So I thought it would be good to give Joyce that option as well. And then when I looked at the bathrooms over in the lobby area, that has like green outdated tile as well. So that was another option I decided to give Joyce to look at.
And I was just gonna add to Brandon's comments, whether we do all of it or not, it allows for the option to do it. And the one observation especially with the older part of the building is that it's reached a stage where we really do need to upgrade certain things. Primarily because if you don't, it's just gonna start looking more and more tired. And so I think that was part of the conversation, is really trying to make the repairs as we need them. And probably build in some contingency in the event that it might cost more than what we anticipate.
Yeah, and then we did have further discussion, me and Joyce, so there was a ask that we get the bathrooms out here completely finished, the ones that aren't finished for the public. So a little bit of that money too, is reserved to finish up that if the board wants us to move forward with that work. We're still working on getting the quotes. And then we just found out today that perhaps maybe there is funds available through the DDA for those bathrooms. So that will be a discussion that we have. So that's why that's a little bit higher to that $50,000, is just to make sure we have enough money there in case we do move forward with getting those bathrooms finished.
So I think I will say, I know we're not taking action tonight, but I would like to see kind of maybe a more modest proposal of fixing the missing tiles in the women's room and, any other necessary upgrades, but I certainly don't think, unless there's a maintenance issue, and I do hear you, Joyce, like if some things need to be updated, but if we're about to do HVAC and generator, those are much more essential to me than having something for aesthetics. I do understand if something gets so old, we can't maintain it, but that's different. And I think as a public building.
But those, with the bathrooms, the
Yeah.
towel is actually missing. And
Oh, I agree. We
yeah,
need to.
You don't have any towel.
Right, we do need to replace that tile, but it sounds like, talking about the outside bathrooms, that's a whole nother kind of programmatic conversation too. So
yeah.
I'd like to see that revised.
And just a reminder for everyone, this is taxpayer funds, and when we may have an expenditure, it should benefit the public in some way. Having granite countertops, unless we invite everybody over for a big party once a year. But yeah, I feel uncomfortable with some of these things, but I mean, also we need to maintain, because if not, then we're gonna have another fire department issue.
And I agree with you. We don't really need extravagance at all, but you know, basically to maintain the building.
Now ready to move on from buildings and grounds. Next item is the attorney.
Hard time for that.
What was that?
The attorney.
All contracted.
Oh, she's contracting.
Yeah.
What? This includes.
Yeah, they're all contracted, all the
Oh.
attorneys.
Okay, Mariah's contracting.
Think and think.
Got it, okay.
And Kathy, I would suggest here is where the Gelman would be added.
Well, potential Gelman expenses go beyond
Yeah.
legal fees.
Yeah,
So it's not appropriate to add just here. We're
Yeah.
gonna need to have it elsewhere.
in
too.
contracted services too.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, isn't it? I know, but isn't Keith usually included under attorneys?
Yeah.
No,
No?
He is sometimes.
Oh.
But also we've had well testing expenses and other expenses like that that aren't attorney expenses.
Although I think we,
but we don't account for them under attorney. though.
Okay.
We account for them under contracted
it's part
services.
of our legal strategy, but yes, okay. So we're proposing to add something under attorney and somewhere else for
Well, I
potential
thought,
government expenses.
I thought we said we were going to add it under.
Under the general comment.
No,
Okay.
for attorney or consultant fees.
Yeah.
Or other fees.
Yes.
So maybe we'll do 10 attorney and 5 consultant. Does that seem about right?
Yes,
It's a
Yeah.
budget.
yes.
I don't know, it seems like attorney, a single attorney bill could take that all. All right. Anything else under attorney? Human resources.
Aurora here. It's not a lot in the budget.
Hi, Aurora.
And actually, I think with the HR budget, this is where we would add an amount for the wage and classification study. And Aurora had just come on board when we started this process, so it's really not in here, but we should add it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What amount do you
You know,
recommend?
I would probably add maybe 15,000-20,000.
So that would include the job descriptions as well?
Yeah, the study would be part of that process.
So a proposal under 101, 270, 820 to add up to 15,000
Yeah.
For-
Yes.
a classification study. I know we paid more than that in 2020. I'm not saying that was right.
Yeah, that was
Just
20.
giving you a point of reference.
I think that was $28,000 we spent on that.
And we can get all of that from MTA. Not 20, much less. That's what they do for us.
And aside from the personnel costs, I just see another 1,500 in contracted services. That's just placeholder.
Yes.
Don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Let her stay, get her money out of it.
Washington County Sheriff's Department, this is a contracted service.
I did have a question, Joyce, on this, the building improvements, 101, 301, 975. And that, you know, it's our building, we maintain it. I see an estimate of 50,000. Is this the estimate to repair the damage that was done in the winter?
Ally, do you have that information?
I do. Yeah, the chief spoke with me and he had told me that I piped first and flooded the sheriff's side of the building. And he was estimating that to be the cost to repair and fix the damage that had occurred. And
I think that's one
obviously,
thing,
chief,
sure.
feel free to chime in on anything on that too.
Yeah, thank you. I'll jump in real quick. If you remember back when we renovated the fire station, that was a main issue on the fire side. The way our roofs work, is they're a flat roof that pitch to two drains in the roof. That drain then travels down the outside wall where it's not insulated from the exterior cold and drains to the outside. The issue we had on the fire side, the north facing side was much more significant than on the sheriff's side, on the south facing side. Every time it got below, say 20 degrees and we got a snow melt, the brick got really cold, water would start running down, we'd freeze in the pipe and pop, there we go, we have a big leak. Less extent on the sheriff's side. However, when we did the renovation to the fire station, we rerouted that water. We created a drain path inside the building in the heated space, which then went down through heated space to underneath the foundation and then ran out. We chose not to do that on the police side. Since we chose not to do it on the police side, we have the leak and failure that we had, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, whatever the time period was. I spoke with the contractor that did the work at the fire station, and we think probably $50,000 would fix that correctly on the police side as well. We'd be able to run both drains together through a heated space, down and out, so that we would never have that problem on the police side again.
Sounds good.
So that's what's budgeted here?
That 50K. And Ally and Joyce, on the sheriff contract estimate, I can't help but notice their projected contract would go down. And that seems impossible to me, knowing the sheriff's department. And so I'm wondering if Ally, maybe you were taking from the 2023 original budget and not the amended, because we get all the OT costs, we regularly.
I believe I was pulling information from an email that was sent to Joyce from the sheriff, but I
Okay.
can go back and look. But that's where I would have gotten the numbers from.
Okay.
Yeah, and I recall when we received information from them, they talked about some type of offset related to a county millage.
There is an offset.
It's not an offset for us, Joyce. Sorry, we all groaned at once. We know what you're talking about. It's yes, the mental health, the public safety mental health millage. And so the county started accounting for it differently. They used to just show it as general fund, and now they're accounting for it differently.
Okay.
And passing it on to give it the appearance of an offset. It is in fact, no offset for the township.
Okay, and then they also indicated an increase through their contracts of 3.5% as part of the cost moving forward. And suggested that we add an amount for overtime. So we need to we'll check that base amount first and then look at these other expenses. Okay.
We haven't had a sheriff's report.
There's actually one in the next meeting packet.
We already got it today.
Yeah. Just as,
Or you can go into Sunshine News, they have it every month.
just as an FYI for the March 5th meeting, I believe Commander Flores and Lieutenant Hunt was gonna be here for the budget discussion, in case you have questions.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to roads?
Sure. Gillian Rhodes?
Oh, roads.
Yeah, roads. We need them.
Okay, so Joyce, Will, Chris, joined us. We've been meeting with the road commission and we had a potential list of roads, improvements. That was back in, what was it, November, December. We had to allocate the ARPA funds by the end of the year. So that was just a tentative list. We've changed the list somewhat. That's gone, that's actually, we're waiting for the road commission to come back with that. So, there was the 550,000 of ARPA funds we had allocated. I guess that uses up all the ARPA funds at the end of it.
Yep.
Now, Jess asked me a question earlier and I may get this wrong, Joyce, but, or will, either one of you could. So the way that Adam Labe had explained it to us is that there is a grant that they provide every year and it's up to like $100,000. But if we apply that grant towards our ARPA funds, there's something that would, with the ARPA funds, it would mess something up.
Well, I think,
remember?
what he was saying is that if they applied the grant to the ARPA funds, it would mean spending less of the ARPA money. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what was suggested that we should leave that intact under the current agreement that was approved by the board. And then moving forward, probably before the season start, look at kind of a supplemental agreement where we could provide some additional funding in order to get the match, which is about $120,000.
Right, and that's what you see in the 660,000.
Because it includes 140,000 of general funds, so I just want to make sure.
Right, and that's why.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a lot of money for roads.
Yeah, well, actually, that's about right for every year that we've spent in the past. It's just that it's different this year because we don't have the SAD.
Okay.
Yeah, and one other thing is, and I did talk to Ally and Joyce about this and quite a bit. We have two neighborhoods that have been charged for engineering costs under special assessments. It's Lamplighter and also Park Ridge. And engineering costs are not special assessments. They do not have improvements. Engineering costs can be applied to the full SAD if there was improvements. That's the whole point of a special assessment, is to raise the value of the parcel from the improvement. So I have researched this. Kathy has verified with Mike Homier back last year. Yes, it was through an email. Had a list of questions and one of them was, can we charge for engineering without a SAD? And he said, no, this money needs to be returned to them. I have pulled the parcel numbers, how much it was per parcel, and Andrea left, but Andrea has verified all of this. It just needs a resolution and for legal to look over the resolution. It ends up being, Ally, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I gave you the numbers earlier.
You want me to list them off?
Yeah, please. One was,
So you had told me $29,950 for Park Ridge Laurentide. Is that
Yes.
the street name? And then 19,500 for Lamplighter and Pheasant.
yes.
Pheasant Ridge, just Pheasant. I don't remember, but that's my notes.
Yes, thank you. So this is the thing, is that those neighborhoods are public roads. They should never have had engineering costs because the road commission generally comes in and gives a guesstimate of what they want. So we should not have gone out and hired an engineering company for this. So it is right for us to return this money to these parcel owners. And then that should be it regarding cleaning up all the SADs, except for the Township Improvement Revolving Fund, which we'll get there eventually.
We'll get to it.
Okay, but that is not reflected in this 660,000. So we just,
Are you proposing it be reflected in the budget or that we could do it via budget amendment when the resolutions are ready?
Well, if the information is available in this fiscal year, we can look at it this year and not have to do anything in the upcoming fiscal year.
So then,
okay,
why don't we make a note to make
I'll
that
get with
change?
Andrea.
Cool.
Okay.
I have another question on roads, and I don't know if Matt Parks is here. It's not reflected here in 101,446, but that's where it would be if it had a number, the Park Road in the capital plan, it says Park Road improvement and a Park Road roundabout. And it's a $5.5 million project in the capital improvement plan, not for this fiscal year, but I want to flag that's the first time it's being proposed as a capital project. And certainly there's no funding source for it besides the general fund and a little bit of a grant. So I'm pretty concerned that it's there.
So Chris, is Matt in the meeting?
Yeah,
Pardon?
I'm here.
Okay, Matt, you want to talk about that?
He is always with us.
Yes, I am. Yeah, that number actually does seem a little high, so I can go back and look at my notes. But there's some discussions, some negotiations, probably with the road commission, because when we did our preliminary, and we're looking to go to RAC and present the preliminary engineering study, and then probably come to the board after that, probably sometime in April or May. But essentially, the intersection of Park and Zeeb needs a signal upgrade as part of the paving of Park Road. And when we did our study and we looked at that and worked with the road commission, we noticed that Park Road's at a little bit of a skew. And with the speed limit on green light east westbound versus in red light north southbound, that's a very awkward and dangerous kind of curve to go through at the speed that Park is posted at. So the road commission actually authorized engineering company, not OHM, to look at some other options, alternatives for that intersection. So there'd be a cost share of some type. What amount, we don't know yet, but I think that 5 million is probably inclusive of not only the road paving, the drainage improvements, the roundabout, or some other alternative intersection improvement and pathway. So there's a lot of things going on there. And that number also, just right off the cuff, it probably is coming from something we provided, but it's probably extremely conservative. So,
And
you know,
Matt, I trust your engineering completely. I just want to say from a policy point of view, I just think that maybe this is premature to be in a capital plan until we learn a little bit more about it, because I just don't think it's even ready to be in a township plan, Matt, until we, RAC and the board hears the presentation, because I think a majority of this is a county project, and it's sort of like, I don't want to be, putting other entities' costs in our plan, and we certainly don't have the money. It would devastate our general fund.
well, and honestly, Clerk Flintoff, it's a project that isn't going to be built for several years. So, I mean, it can be in your capital plan and out a ways, but for this upcoming fiscal year, you're probably at best doing some engineering work that would also be split with the road commission. So you're probably looking at 10% of that number at the highest.
Did we already do?
But Matt, that's not, and you may not know this, Matt, but we got 2.5 million in 25-26, the rest in the next year. And so I'm just saying, if we're to assign fund balance, for next year, or the year after, it would have a pretty immediate effect.
So,
yeah.
So would it make sense to maybe have Matt revisit those numbers or push it out further? How do we keep it on the horizon?
Sure, I think both of those, revisit the numbers, push it out, but first and foremost, is this our cost? I would have to be persuaded it is, one, that we should pay for it, and two, is it a priority? We'd have to have that
We
conversation.
never, as a board, voted on this project.
Right.
So that's the thing, is it's being pushed through, but nobody's really, there's certain people talking about it.
Yeah.
And man, I have a question.
It needs to go to the rack first. And honestly, there was a lot of projects that were listed in, this process seems like, you guys are going through a lot of detail and stuff, but we weren't necessarily consulted on when and how. And then we've been waiting to present the project, the preliminary engineering to RAC. So I agree. If I were you, and what Joyce's comment is is appropriate, I'd push it out. I mean, I said it. It's probably honestly like a 2027 construction project. So this is a ways out. So
Matt? Also, I have a question about the roundabout there. That is a primary road. That's the road commission, you know, that's theirs.
exactly. So
Yeah.
there should, I mean, the number that the township would be responsible for would just be the paving of park in the pathway that would go along it. So you're probably looking at half already immediately. Township expense would probably be half of that 5 million. So I'd have to go back and see where you got the numbers, how it was implemented. We weren't involved in the CIP necessarily, other than just providing some numbers to Allie, she was great to work with, but I didn't see the final product. So, yeah, I should definitely revisit that.
And so the Miller Z roundabout, the township has no expenditures with that. That's the
This would be
county
the
project,
same.
right?
This would probably be the same in the same boat, Jillian.
Okay.
It would be improvements on Zeeb, whether the road commission would ask the township to participate is something that can be talked about, but there's safety money grants out there, and that's how Miller Zeeb got paid for. So you could probably do something very similar to this. So I think that number is probably about twice as big as it should be, and it's probably a couple years too soon. So
Yeah, I think we need to finish the pathway first.
Agreed.
Before we run with scissors on other projects.
Matt, were you gonna do some kind of presentation tonight on an issue? I don't remember what the issue was.
I think we're expecting OHM to do a presentation in March on the Zebra Road Phase 5. So at either the 15th, I mean, not the 15th, either the 5th or the 19th, probably the 19th. At some point subsequent to that, we would have a presentation about their work on Park Road. But I think what I understand is it's first going to go to RAC. So RAC would have the presentation from OHM on Park Road, and then RAC would evaluate it and make some kind of recommendation to the board.
that's my understanding.
Does that sound right to you, Jillian?
I don't know if this is the first time I've heard about it, so.
About Park Road?
No, the only time I've heard about Park Road is when, you know, you formed the RAC committee and that was one of the first things on the agenda. But it wasn't because the board had agreed for that. That was certain people's.
The board approved the engineering study.
Well, that
We'll
was just
hear the
recently.
results of.
But yeah, and right now, the road advisory committee, and we're working on the next road funding plan and we're broadening it, which we still have to bring to the board along with the SAD primer. So this is in the SAD policy.
Well, does it make sense though to you to have it go to RAC first?
That was my plan. And honestly, I haven't formally asked to be put on our RAC agenda, but Jillian, a couple weeks ago at a board meeting, you made a comment that you hadn't seen any of the product from the preliminary engineering, and you and I had talked about potentially going to RAC. So I need to pick a date, but right now with everything else going on and you guys doing budgeting, I haven't been pushing on that. And so I think the time frame that supervisor mentioned, April, May, would probably make sense. And then after that, RAC would digest it and move it forward to the board for a presentation to the board. So
well, the thing is that, Matt, the board ordered the engineering for Park Road. So I assume that would come back to the board since the RAC did not recommend that.
I don't think we're claiming that RAC recommended it.
No, but
I'm just saying that in terms of
but-
evaluating the work product, that RAC maybe be a first step.
Suggest that. Do you want it at the board or?
Well, RAC doesn't know anything about this really, other than from 2 years ago. The board ordered the engineering, so I think it should come back to the board.
Okay.
either way, that's your guys' call.
Thank you.
Okay, you don't have to decide that tonight anyway. But in any case, that was the thought about how that particular issue would move forward. The roads topic, are we done with that? Can we move on?
Yes, we're done with roads.
Well, it may come up again under DDA. Recycling.
You.
I think it sounds great. Will, do you think it's realistic for this year?
I think, well, I think we need to sit down with folks in the subcommittee and sustainability. My sense is that their recommendation may not be to move forward with the drop-off station, which is something that we've been talking about for years.
Okay.
They have some different ideas about how to promote recycling and to sort of fill some gaps about, you know, that aren't met by our residential curbside pickup. And that's been sort of the issue with reestablishing the drop-off, is how to do that without being redundant. But they have some ideas for things that would be different, like, for example, a technology drop-off kind of event as opposed to a permanent drop-off station.
Great.
So we may want to revisit the amount in here, but I think we need to sit down with them and talk with them.
Okay.
About it.
But if there is a reduction, you think you could realistically recommend that could help our deficit?
Well, I guess I'd also question, so you had this recycling event, does anybody actually done the investigation? They really recycle just because they claim they recycle? Do we actually know? I mean, the last time I read an article was like, it wasn't GFL, it was one of the Ann Arbor contractors, all that recycling and separation we were doing for the last 2 years never got separated, all went to the trash can. So what you were doing for the last 2 years was a complete waste of time.
Yeah, GFL is crushing the bottles, the glass bottles, and using it for their road.
Okay, that's great. If that's true, I'm just saying we should do some validation before we spend money. Are they really recycling? Or is it more of a facade?
Well, so what they're recommending, although I need to sit down with Joyce and with them and talk it through, is not to have a drop-off station for things like plastic and bottles and so
No,
on.
I understand that.
What they're talking about is special events for special categories of recycling.
Computers and all that. Just all I'm saying is, before we drop $50,000 or whatever number that it is, are they really recycling? That's all I'm saying. So a little bit of homework to make sure that's just not all pretend.
Or not?
Okay.
Yeah, feel good.
Well, I think they have done some work, but we need to talk that through. And I think what we're looking at is some kind of reduction. What's proposed.
Okay.
Shall we talk about the watershed council? I think that's pretty straightforward. We already
Support.
we supported the contract.
Yeah.
Are there any questions about that we need to address? Laura?
Planning and zoning?
Good evening, Laura.
Good thing for the second time. Questions?
Yeah. Or did you want to present anything?
Well, no, I mean, the main, I guess, the highlights are, the consultant fees were increased by 10%. We also increased revenue by 10%. We talked about that earlier.
Well, I thought it was the 2.5%.
It's not, it's 10%. That's 20,000
That's-
more of, that's what we had increased.
Proposed in the
Proposed.
agreement, but it hasn't, we're in the process of meeting to discuss the agreement.
The agreement, right, yeah. But of course, as part of the increase in fees, we're also increasing the revenue portion. The revenue portion should also be looked at as an increase.
Right, and again, with fees, we gotta look at all of our costs, because I know this is, our planning coordinator, our planning commission, all of those,
Yes.
fees.
They all are included here, yep.
Are there fees for interns?
Yeah, that's under part-time salaries.
And why do we have interns?
The last 2 years, there have been 2 projects recommended. It's recommended again. Joyce, is that something that you've worked with the planning commission chair
I
on?
think the planning commission had 2 people as interns that worked on sustainability projects. And they did a presentation with the board from their study from the use of those interns.
And what are they tasked with now? Do you know?
I'm not sure of what they're working on right now. I can check and find out. And
Yeah.
and Jillian, the other part of it, I think it was just for a time frame. So Jan probably will get 2 new people.
But why? So
There'll be a proposal for what it's.
She'll provide us with that information on what they'll be charged with doing.
They,
But
the
they-
last 2 years, they've been grad students, typically for the summer, on special projects, but it does sound like something, I would agree with Jillian that the board has been pretty disconnected from that work,
Yeah.
determining what the work might be, and, just as we're looking at the costs going up, it would be good to get more information. So I do have a question, and, we don't need to discuss it tonight, but with the 5% of the project manager on zoning and 5% on planning, and I appreciate the new position, new employee who comes with a lot of talents we can use differently. Acknowledge Laura's also, come in and kind of taken on a bigger role that Doug Luan used to have, and doing an awesome job. And I'm just, wondering though, as we try to move more towards providing more of the services in-house, is there a bigger role for the planning, for the project manager potentially in the future, and maybe, zoning or, some part of things?
Well, I know we had discussion about having the project manager work with the zoning board of appeals along with Carlisle Workman. I think the real question is time and to what extent that person would be able to take on additional responsibilities. So since it's kind of new for us and for the project manager, we need to maybe track and see how much time is available to pick up other duties.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge too, the board does need to, also appoint a zoning official. I think we still have a very old resolution that states, Doug Luan, and maybe we can kind of broaden that so that multiple people, multiple positions can carry out some of those duties.
Yeah, and, on that point, I've had a discussion with Carlisle Wortman about potentially recommending that they serve as zoning administrator with our project manager because of his planning background as an alternate, so that he can be more familiar with what the zoning board is doing.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I do get concerned for our office coordinator and planning coordinator, Christy and Fran at the front desk, they make, certain things they approve, but just want to make sure that they're kind of fully supported and backed up should we ever be challenged.
Any other questions for?
I have a question with some of what you just said, Joyce. So, I'm on the ZBA and I was surprised to just hear you say that you were contemplating the project manager assisting with the ZBA, because I hadn't heard that before.
Well, we looked at splitting the time with 5% of the time in the planning area and 5% in the zoning area. So, and the project manager isn't at that point at this stage because he's primarily new to the position. But I think the vision was to have that person be involved as a backup for Carlisle Wortman to work with the zoning board, as well as do some things in the planning area.
It just has seemed like the ZBA is highly functional, is what I wanted to say.
It's meant as a backup. Also, as
Yeah.
far as zoning, there are things in the summer, there are a lot of inspections in addition to applications. And so with my limited day and a half time actually in the office and Chris's expertise in the same area, I'm hoping that he can do some inspections for me and we can share some of those duties.
So not so much the ZBA.
Not so much the ZBA, but other zoning functions. He may have to help, ZBA if that comes down to it, but
Yeah.
it's not his main role.
Okay.
And I think too, when we're in the season, at least from my experience, when I came on board last year, we were always behind. So, this is another way to try to be more responsive.
I would like a job description or what Chris is doing, because it sounds like we're having him in many different
Right.
places, and just for clarity.
Oh,
for
yeah,
us.
we have, it was on the agenda initially when we advertised the position, but I can get that information for you. It's been a while. Yeah.
Right, and just, I know that we're trying to, I know he's asked for a rack for ZBA now and just different things, and just so we're clear.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to be, spread thin either.
And one area of work that I don't want to get lost is the sustainability work. I know we have a very active group in our planning commission chair. We're very lucky. She's put in so much time to it. But that is something that we contemplated, and not necessarily staffing the sustainability group, but designating somebody here in Township Hall who's kind of responsible for implementing sustainability efforts, and Ann Arbor, they call it the climate change officer, whoever it is, somebody who's responsible for making sure that when we pass resolutions about net zero, somebody who knows how to kind of implement that.
One other question, under planning, it's the very last line, 101-701-965, special projects, 30,750.
It's a new line item, and that is to include, it's in the narrative in the budget highlights. Was added to the planning budget to account for zoning ordinance updates that we've already talked about, like the Jackson Road overlay, there's renewable energy ordinances. All of those, and then in addition, the SCAP implementation and the sustainability there. So all of those are encompassed in that special projects.
Okay. And revenues for planning and zoning, 259,325. We may have covered this earlier. Is it 10 o'clock yet? No. So that's the revenues, but our expenditures for planning and zoning, 629,000. So where do revenues come from for planning and zoning?
The general fund, and then the fee-based work is from fees, but some of it's appropriately the general fund.
Yeah. Okay, so there's I really think that needs to be looked at, closely.
The last time the fee schedule was updated was 10 years ago. So clearly, costs have risen while our fees have stayed the same. So.
Right. Thank you.
Code enforcement?
I have no questions. I just want to commend you on including the membership for continuing certifications and education. That's awesome. And I encourage all of our departments to, enroll in those sorts of membership organizations and continue that. You're doing a great job.
Any other questions or comments for code enforcement?
Well, now that you're here, okay, and I've been bringing this up, we've talked about it, but I want the township to have some type of active shooter training. And Sean has, you work in, as a sheriff, at the courts, but the sheriff department does provide that for free. And I know we've had some review from the sheriff in the past, but we need to have something in place. Unfortunately, this is the time that we're living in where something could happen. Not that we want to be afraid, but we need to be prepared. I want everybody to be safe when they're here.
Isn't that a conversation we should have with the sheriff's department?
Code enforcement could be speaking with them and bringing it in.
So I by all means can facilitate the conversation, and it would be conducted by the sheriff's department.
It's-
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I would just suggest that we involve our HR generalist, as somebody who spends a lot of time in this building. I think there's a lot of training on safety. But a lot of it's around closing doors, turning off lights, how to use those red things. Regular CPR training, the chief did that once for us, twice for us, thank you. So I just think of a whole kind of broader training on safety from the day-to-day to the most extreme.
Okay, well, thank you, Sean. Thanks for Well, the historic district is the next item, and that hopefully will play out, and we will have some revenue from that. We may have a few minor costs preparing the site, but I think this could even be resolved pretty much before next fiscal year.
That would be nice.
Yeah,
Great.
if things move rapidly. Fire department.
Good evening, board.
Think about what's gonna answer questions if they have questions.
Okay, happy to. You'll have a chance to make a presentation at a special meeting on the 19th.
Just did have a couple things I'd taken notes from the beginning of the meeting. The manager did mention safer grants. She's absolutely correct. The notice of funding opportunity, the NFO has not come out for those yet. Those do fund personnel. And again, she's absolutely correct. Sometimes they allow you to retain people, sometimes they only require new people. So unfortunately, we don't know what that will be.
But when the notice comes out, those terms will become.
Yeah, we'll know.
When do they come out with that? Or,
You gotta ask the federal government.
okay, I thought maybe there's a schedule.
Yep, we're still working on the 2023, so yes, there is a schedule.
Are there other questions for the fire department?
Yes, inspection fees. We established the position of marshal assistant chief a couple years ago to be primarily covered by the inspection fees.
Yes.
I see we brought in 11,000 of the budgeted 75,000. What can we do to improve that?
Part of what you're seeing there is correct categorization of those fees. Once we get to this fiscal year end, I'll do
Oh, chief, I see. It's that same problem. I see it's right above the 45. Got it.
I want to give Assistant Chief Sears a full year and then actually evaluate exactly where we're at with that.
And chief, what about other fees? I don't know, I think we brought this up in a meeting at one time about, there's things that, like drunken people that get lost in Huron River during the middle of the night and we have to, rescue them.
They're tough to collect from, Jillian.
Well, actually, they're not, because you can give them a ticket, and up north, if you go to the sand dunes, it says you go down the sand dunes and we have to rescue you, we're gonna charge you $3,000.
Sure. There are absolutely some cost recovery things we can do. That one specific that you mentioned is probably a minority of calls.
It was an example.
Yeah, there are some that we can absolutely do cost recovery on, some car accidents. Some extrication type calls where we actually have to use the jobs to have people out of vehicles. The problem is working with a billing company to do that.
Okay.
It was much easier at my former employers to do that because they used a billing company for EMS transport fees. So they would add that in. And typically there's a minimum type cost to employ someone that to do the cost recovery for those. And it's often exceeded by what we would bring in revenue wise.
I see, okay.
Chief, I have a question about your capital plan fund balance and the 3 firefighters. So in the capital improvement plan is listed the water tanker, which is at the $1 million, but we already purchased that. Take that off the list. What I don't see is any contemplation of a second fire station over the next 6 years. And would recommend that we have that in the plan, understanding we still have to identify funding sources for it as we do for others. And with that $1 million that we've already expended, Ally, where are we at on the fund balance? Because when I look at the fund balance here in the 24-25 recommended, we're at 3 million, which is far above, what is that, like 15 months of operating?
Yeah.
Ish. Right?
Yeah.
So 15 months of operating. Our fund balance policy for the fire department requires nine months of operating, 10 for a buffer. But it just looks to me that we have far beyond the amount of fund balance we need to hire those 3 firefighters sooner.
Can I clarify fund balance again? That is all the assets. That is not just cash. So please keep that in mind. It's the trucks, it's the equipment, all those values, plus cash, because that's value. So you can't look at that thinking, wow, look at all that cash. Uh-uh.
And Donna, if I disagree with you. The fire fund, that is all cash. That what you're describing is absolutely true for the DDA, water and sewer.
For
But
everything.
no, for fire fund, that is cash. And for general fund, that is cash.
We better start looking into the record keeping then.
That is cash.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So Ally, I guess my question is that, and you don't have to answer it right now to put you on the spot, but that 3 million, I mean, have you all really budgeted as much as you think we need for the fire department? And we still have 3 million in fund balance, because if that's,
Well, this,
that's what I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
Joyce.
look like is through 3/31. So that may be, it may not be up to date. That's the only thought I
Some-
had.
Something else too is
Yeah.
the fund balance is carrying over. Also, when I ran this report, it was at the end of January. So
Yeah.
we're still missing 3 months of expenses that are gonna flow in, that aren't represented in the 23-24 activity column.
Okay.
Just a note to keep in mind.
Okay, so when we next convene on the budget Tuesday, could you have kind of the projected fund balance of what it would be? I'm just curious about, I don't want to leave anything on the table when we don't even meet the MIOSHA requirement for 2 in and 2 out for our first station. I appreciate the effort, Joyce and Ally, to figure out how to get those 3 firefighters 6 months in, but if we could even budget them for 7/1 instead of 10/1, that would help the township.
Brian, you have your hand raised.
Yes, good evening. The fund balance is a little bit elevated compared to where it would have been previously, but general fund will be the same way because of the timing difference, or excuse me, the recognition of the tax levy difference. Remember, for FY24, there's actually 2 years worth of revenue. We switched the calendar so that the December levy is recognized in the same year instead of in the subsequent year. So 3 million is, yes, it's there, but the fund balance policy, the 9 months only gets you back to your next December 1, 2025 levy. So you really, if your policy is you want to have X number of months in reserve, it should be 9 months plus X. But I don't disagree that you have enough money there if you wanted to hire people at an earlier time.
And Brian, I would hope too that, if there's a recommendation to change the fund balance, whatever that X is, you could give us that for a future policy revision.
Certainly.
Further questions? Trustee Carey.
Chief, so if we hire the 3 additional, will we be able to keep them ongoing? Or does this depend on if we ask the voters for a higher special assessment? Or
That's probably a finance question, based on our levy.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see, Joyce, if, I don't know if we can, but Joyce or Ally, like a little more projection of like, if we hire them, whether it's September 1, how are we gonna sustain, the 12 firefighters?
And I think ideally it would be great if we could get the grant, because normally that grant is for like at least 2 years.
Typically
Or
3 is what I've
3
seen
years.
lately. Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to lose that opportunity just by maybe making, a decision today, and next month we find out we could get the grant. And from what I've experienced in most communities, the federal government normally provides grant funding to almost all communities. So,
Gee, how come we haven't gotten this grant before?
It is competitive. Yeah, and we've always, our grants have gone through the end and they've expired funds before they've
Yeah,
paid us
and
or
he's
given
trying
us
to,
awarded the grants.
yeah, he's trying to be more proactive, getting out there, ready to go. And then the other part of it, we should really have conversations with our lobbyists once, and our legislators, once we submit the application so that we can get that type of support. That's what other communities do.
Thank you.
Further questions for the fire department this evening? Knowing that we will have a chance to talk in more length in a couple of weeks.
But any difference of opinion on including the second station in the 6-year plan, just so we have some sketch of what it might look like?
The capital improvement plan?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I would put it in the capital.
yeah, I
improvement
think we
plan.
should state that that's, everywhere we can.
We haven't dropped that as I think.
We had Park Road, but not the second station.
My
so I
understanding of
wanna
a
get our
capital
grants.
improvement plan is you put in things that you anticipate you may do, as well as things that you absolutely, feel that you have to do.
But they should be priorities, general.
Well, we can prioritize within a capital improvement plan, but I don't see the value of sort of like omitting things from the capital improvement plan
I
if you
agree.
think that they may come up. But we certainly I would think, we all are in agreement that we recognized as a board unanimously that we wanted to move forward with this particular project. So I see no reason not to include it in the capital improvement plan.
Is it in there? I can't read it. It's so small.
No, not yet.
But knowing that we have yet to discuss as a board, actually our plan,
To fund.
the eventual plan to fund.
Well, funding is another question, but
Yeah.
having it in the capital improvement plan is, I think we're in agreement on
Yeah,
that. I would imagine.
We should have a conversation about the capital improvement plan anyway. I mean, on its own.
Yes. Shall we move on though?
Yeah.
We've got some time left and we can talk with our Parks, Preserves and Pathways Director while she's still our Parks, Preserves and Pathways Director.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Advice speech, I think, right? It's a farewell speech that was.
Oh, there's a potluck tomorrow.
Right.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, so I had one question on revenue for 208, Ally, Joyce, or Anna. The 530,000 state grants, which grant is that?
I believe that is in line with expenses that she is anticipating will be spent that year. So I think it is the MEDC grant. I think.
Great.
Anna, let me know if that's incorrect, but I think that's what it is.
Could you say the line number again, Jessica?
Sure.
What page
It's
and what line?
Page 56, 208, 751, 540 state grants, 530,000.
Yeah. Elliot said that accurately. We just looked at the funds that we have budgeted to go towards Zebra Road Pathway for fiscal year 24, 25, and then put those into revenues.
Okay.
So yeah, it is the state grant.
Awesome. Another thing, I think it's gotta be just a typo. 208, 751, 978 Scio Ridge Construction. And in the projected budget there, do you see that, Ally? It suddenly says 2.6 million. I think that's just a typo.
Can you say the number again, please?
208, 751, 978 Scio Ridge Construction. It's 2.6 million in fiscal in 25, 26. I think that's a typo. And it throws up your bottom line.
I don't see what you see.
It's on page 57, the very last line.
Yeah, last line of
Okay.
page 57. In the 25, 26 projected budget.
Yep, really.
You see that 2.6 million?
Oh, sorry, I had 25, 26 hidden in what I was looking at. But yes, no, I think that was projected in Anna's budget. She gave me, let me pull it up.
Gold, paving with gold.
Yeah, is this Upland Scio Ridge? That should be 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
good.
Yeah. Yeah, so 25-26. So that's why your 25-26 budget is off. Okay, cool.
Attached.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so then, the land improvements, the line above that for this proposed year of 602,500. I guess I see the detail in the capital improvement plan for that, the Marshall Park, Township Park, Van Curler, and then some Deep Road Pathway. And I want to talk a little bit about Deep Road Pathway because I do agree, like it really made an impression on me, the last presentation that you and Matt did, just how incredibly expensive it's going to be and how we need to move on it. And so I'm wondering how we're gonna get there. When I look at the capital improvement plan and I look at this budget and we talk about, you know, doing these other projects, how can we be assured that we have enough to finish the Zeeb Road pathway first? Because I still haven't yet seen, I know we had a lot of questions about the MEDC and when we went and how we could spend those funds, a request the manager was making to the state. So I know we have moving parts, but how do we know we can afford that pathway before we approve other projects that could wait?
So if we look at the fund balance plus deferred funds of the PPP budget, we currently have about 2.5 for budgeting purposes. When you take that number, which includes MEDC grants, and then you add the additional millage funds that come in every year, just under $1 million. The calculations add up on my end that Zeeb Road is more than possible. I've requested from Joyce and spoken with Ally about working with Plant Moran to create that plan to be able to bring to the board.
That would be wonderful, because I know it's tricky and it's technical, so it'd be great to have Pam Gaps help on that, to just have a capital budget for parks, but specifically for Zeeb Road Pathway 5, just each fiscal year, how we're gonna fund it. And because I think, at least for me, my impression is that's the priority to get that done. I know the other projects aren't nearly as expensive and they're all worthy, but I know we're gonna need to just push and get that project done no matter what it costs.
Yeah, and I'm glad Chris is joining me here, but Chris and myself and Plant Moran have spoken about creating this plan, and as project manager, I think Chris will help with that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to approve other like projects to move forward immediately, you know, be it the bathrooms, township hall, others, just until we can be sure that we've got those monies set aside, because it's gonna take a couple years of millage funds and we only have what, 6 more? So.
I'm sure it'll be. Anyway, but you're right.
I'm just saying we're 4 years into a 10-year millage, so.
Other questions?
But we just don't finish it.
Is that something we could get as part of this budget process, Ally or Brian?
Well, I do know, Anna, at the time that she did the presentation, and maybe as a starting point, that information could be reviewed with Plant Moran, because
Yeah.
just based on what was presented at that point in time, it appeared to me that the funds were there, and in addition to phase 5, there was still funding remaining based on the millage. So I think we could probably review that with Plant Moran.
That would be good. If we have that validated by Plant Moran.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's, right, yeah, under Parks and Pathways, wait, total for there's the very last, I'm sorry, I'm on page 59. This would be, it says totals for Department 770, Parks and Pathways maintenance, and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we have?
It's a consolidation of departments within 208. So all the numbers are there. They just simplified and improved the accounting so that it's all in one department.
Before there were two
Yeah.
separate categories. Right?
Oh, got
Was
it.
one
Okay.
and parks was the other.
I see. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that there was maintenance.
Thank you.
There it is.
Ready to move on? Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks
Annie.
for all your work, and thanks also, I like the illustration that you provided, the illustrations that you provided in your narrative too. That was helpful.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Brings us to transit bus service. Who's going to speak to that?
I'll let you speak to it, Will.
Well, look, we have a committee, an advisory committee that's been meeting and working, and we've been learning a lot. We have input from both Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority and WAVE, which is the bus, the transport service that serves sort of western Washington, yeah, the rural kind of bus service. And how, so we're learning how those two work together in Scio Township. We're meeting again tomorrow afternoon, and I think we'll soon have some proposal to bring back to the Board of Trustees. But we do have what do they call it, POSA?
Purchase of service
Purchase
agreement.
of service agreement, right?
Yeah.
So basically, what we're looking at, I think, in the budget is a continuation of service under POSA, right? That's what's in the proposed budget.
Right. So, not to get into a lot of detail tonight, but it's actually been very beneficial to have that committee meet and pull together the research and the information. And Chris Chang has been involved, and he actually did a survey of surrounding communities. And what we found was that Scio did not have that same level of service. And so part of what we plan to do is present some other options that may not be as expensive with what we currently levy, but we could still do more to provide services in the community. It's been a good experience.
That's great, Joy.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be the future agenda item, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be by the end of March.
Because we've got a deadline if we wanna do it in
End of
August.
April.
Yeah. So,
So a ballot proposal for
So-
August would need to be approved by
It's-
the board by the end of April.
So May 14th at 4 PM, which is 3 hours before our first May meeting, so end of April.
Right.
Question, the 24-25 recommended budget, I just wanna make sure I'm off the year. I thought that we just did our last collection.
It appears that that is not the case.
I thought, and I really probably wrong, Joyce, but I really thought that we had just gotten our last collection December 1, 2023, and that it was applied to the 23-24 budget. So I'm wondering where that 24-25 is coming from, but I'm assuming I'm wrong.
I looked, and when I looked last, 24-25, you were going to levy one more time, December 1st, 2024. And that would be your last.
I think that is accurate. I only know this because I looked at the language. Christy was able to find it. I couldn't find it, but she found it for the proposal, which was approved in 2015. So it was a 10-year, and the final collection would be with the winter taxes, this coming winter taxes in 2024.
Okay, I'm gonna just triple check that
I think that's a good thing to do.
to make sure that,
yeah, I have that information, but I don't have it here tonight.
no, that's fine,
Yeah.
that's fine, that's good, I'll triple check that.
Yeah, Andrea had put together a summary.
Andrea had as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
she put together a summary for me, so I can get that for you.
Yeah, and I'll just check the counting records too, the number of years.
Sure.
We can bring it as an agenda.
Yeah,
Please.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can do that.
We all.
Yeah.
So, are we prepared to move on then from?
Yes.
So open space, land preservation.
Great.
I don't know if we have people, from the LPC participating remotely or.
I mentioned this to Barry and Will when I had the opportunity to speak with them with Joyce yesterday, but just want to ask Ally and Joyce to please add the open space to the capital improvement plan. You know, even if it's just one line item, I think it's important to reflect that we plan to acquire land. They were in our first CIP. And other than that, I don't have any comments. And Joyce, there's no project manager time for 233. Is that what's planned for this fiscal year?
Right, we talked about, having, Chris work with them, and there's a meeting scheduled
Okay.
with them to have that discussion, but we have not started that process. I'm just really waiting for us to meet, kind of decide what the, duties will be,
Okay,
and then we'll have a better sense of direction. And I think that's scheduled like next week.
cool, thank you.
Okay, so no further comments or questions about open space land preservation at this time. American Rescue Plan Act,
It's all spent,
it's all committed.
committed.
Downtown Development Authority. I don't think Bob is on. So I will try and answer any questions I can, but we may have to defer if something goes beyond. Oh, actually, Ryan's here too, so
Sure.
Ryan can help answer
I-
questions.
I had a couple small suggestions on the DDA fund. A couple things I just see popped up twice, Ally. DDA 494000706 full-time employee salaries of 9,300. I think that should actually be zero, Will, because it's already reflected in cost allocation. That's the old way, but the DDA used to bill for the indirect. Further, another duplication is 494000807, the audit fees of 5,600, that should be zeroed out. That's also covered in the cap.
Also cover over here.
I think what Jessica's saying is that 494000969.
Yes,
Cost allocation, replaces those other two line.
Oh, both of them.
yes.
I thought you said tax.
Oh, excuse me, Donna. No cap, sorry.
I guess the question is the cost allocation reflected in the budget that was received from the DDA, or is this something that the township is going to propose to the DDA board as an alternative to what was in the DDA budget?
It's what is in the manager's proposed budget. That is not what was in the budget that came from the DDA.
So
Probably should discuss it. So they
yes, so
understand.
this is a proposal, basically, if we were to go with the cost allocation, that would be a proposal to the DDA board as an alternative to what the DDA board approved in its budget.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So it's, in a sense, it's those two items that you were pointing out are what are in the DDA's proposed budget. And the cost allocation is the alternative that we would be proposing to the DDA.
Yes. And I did have a question, the DDA has proposed $250,000 of public projects and $500,000 of roads.
Do you want to know what those are?
I do.
So the $500,000 is for, is anticipated to pay for up to 2 repavings of side roads off of Jackson Boulevard. The top priority has been Dino Drive for several years, and if you go and look at it, you'll understand why that's a top priority. And the secondary is Medi Drive. And again, if you drive on it and drive all the way to the end, you'll see.
And that's budgeted for 100% of the costs?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what's budgeted for. The other item is anticipated to pay for potentially for improvements to parks that are within the DDA district. So the 2 that are eligible are Township Hall Park or the sort of northern portion of the West Scio Preserves. Those are the only 2 park or nature preserves that are located within the DDA district.
And I just want to say, like, aside from, like, any opening up of Township Hall Park, I would just ask, we need to have a deeper conversation with the DDA and parks and the board. It's just a whole nother level of activity to have going on behind Township Hall. So I wouldn't want the DDA to proceed unilaterally.
Well, the DDA wouldn't be proceeding unilaterally. It would be providing funds to the township to do things that are on the list of amenities that are proposed for Township Hall Park. So it would come through the Parks, Preserves and Pathways
Okay.
Committee and the Parks, Preserves and Pathways Director and the project manager and would then come to the board. Nothing would happen until the board gave approval. So it's no unilateral action.
Okay, great.
Quite the opposite.
Thank you.
Are we done? Ready to move on to utility sewer? Brandon, welcome back. Where you at? Hi. Talk quickly, we can get the utility department of water as well.
I just want to clarify one thing for the narrative. I know what you meant by it, but we should correct it before it's finalized. It's a total of 6 FTEs proposed across water and sewer. Everybody's paid 50% each, so it's not 12 total, it's 6 total. Okay. Brandon, can you talk a little bit? Right now, you've got a utility director, field supervisor, 2 field techs. You have 3 field tech positions, 2 of which are filled. You're asking for a 4th. Can you talk a little bit about that need and why you think you need twice as many people as you have now?
Yeah, so we are moving to be more proactive as far as the things that we do in the field. Our sewer and water district keeps expanding. I know previously in the past, when I talked to Rich, they had even more employees in this at that point in time when the district wasn't even anywhere near as big as it is now. But it's more to do with being proactive. There are things that are not getting done that need to be getting done. Valve exercising is something that needs to get done, which is exercising every water main valve in the district, as well as making notes of ones that need to be replaced. We'll be doing sewer cleaning. Somebody needs to be keeping an eye on them from time to time. We will be doing a meter replacement program that will be done in-house over the next 5 years if you guys approve that.
And is that largely what the budgeted overtime is for?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but most of that, some of that work, we will be having Saturday scheduled because not everybody will be available during the workday. And so once we get enough people lined up for at least one person to work on a Saturday, we'll call and get those scheduled. Hydrant painting hasn't been getting done. That will be a priority this year to do hydrant painting, which is an all day, everyday job with the amount of hydrants we got. And there's so much more other work that would be going into it too. As I talked to Joyce, we plan on to rehire the one that is recently vacant. We will then continue to work through the beginning of 2024 and review of this fourth position. If I feel like it's appropriate to fill the position based on the workload at that time, I'll get with Joyce and we'll have that conversation. So this is definitely something I think we're gonna need. I don't anticipate filling it
Through the year?
maybe partway through the year. But we were allocating funds just in case we thought it was appropriate.
So you mentioned valve replacement, fire pipe, testing the, meter replacement, testing the valves and the painting the hydrants. Is that sewer stuff or water stuff?
That's water stuff. Watching the sewer cleaners from time to time would be sewer stuff. We still gotta, and they have been doing this proactively, but we do need to inspect every single manhole as much as we can every year outside of the contractors doing what they're doing, just to be proactive, and it helps catch sewer backups primarily, or other situations that are going on with the structure itself of the manhole. So, there's definitely a lot of tasks that we'll be doing. Hydrant flushing will be done differently this year than it has in the past, from what I was told, which will require a lot more time. And so the need for more people is definitely going to rise, especially in the years to come.
And you're gonna come across things when you're flush, you're gonna find things when you get out there and flush and test it.
Yeah, certain things can happen, especially with the valve exercising program. Certain things can happen. In the process, when we did this in the city of Flint, it is a much older system, but there are times where valves break or they're not working properly, and this will allow us to prepare for the upcoming year to allocate more funds to do a certain amount of replacements each year to make sure we can shut down our water mains effectively. And this is an Eagle thing that they're requiring just so that we can have control in our system. So it's definitely like a required thing.
So, a question about some of the capital, expenditures, which are a lot. The water reliability study update for 50,000, didn't we just authorize that? I just, some of these items look like things we may have already authorized. I just want to be.
So I'll let Matt speak a little bit more to this, but the water reliability update is more of a. Matt, actually, I think you'll do a better job explaining it. Are you still there?
Yep, I am. I'm sorry, Clerk Flintoff, what was the exact question?
Sure, so there's a lot in the capital improvement plan. One is a water reliability study update, engineering study, for $70,000, 50,000 in this fiscal year, 20,000 in next. What is that? And I'm clearly misremembering because I thought we had just authorized that. So what is it that we'd be doing this and next year for 70,000?
So a water reliability study is something that Eagle requires every 5 years. You guys are about 4 years deep into it. So October of 2025 is when I believe you're going to be due. So we will need to start at some point, probably in the fall or winter of 24, and then wrap it up 25. So it's going to split your fiscal year a little bit. So that's probably where it's coming from. That probably also includes an updated asset management plan that's on file at Eagle, and it also will update your model and some other things that Brandon noticed were missing. But you guys have a water reliability study on file, so that's I would say a more robust budget number in case you want to do some of those other things that I talked about. If you want to do the very bare bones minimum, which Scio typically doesn't do, they're pretty proactive with their utility system. Then it would probably be a little bit less than that. 70,000, probably closer to 50. But for now, yep. Okay.
Okay. Next question. the next one is for $100,000 this year for a lead and copper line identification assistance engineering study. Then $50,000 for lead and copper inventory assistance engineering study. What is the difference between those two?
So the $100,000 is, without knowing exactly how many lines have to be identified, physically. And how we were going to get that work done through a contractor. We thought it may ended up being a different, bid that may have to be put out. After talking it through, we could hopefully get that work done with our sewer cleaning contractor, as an additional line item. So some of that money could be pulled from that.
So are those really two different things, or is that really one project? They're two different projects?
So, yeah, what we're asking OHM to do, compared to the physical identification would be a different contractor actually going out there with one of us to physically verify.
So both of these say engineering studies. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just trying to get clear, and it's because I'm not an expert in this field, but one says lead and copper line identification assistance engineering study. The other says lead and copper inventory assistance engineering study. Both are budgeted for this year, one for 100,000, one for 50,000.
I think the wording might, could be changed a little bit, but, there is the portion that we will have to physically verify in the field. And so that was perhaps, if we needed their assistance, some of that money would be if we needed their assistance to develop, a bid process and stuff like that, to have a contractor come in, under contract and do that work. However, through discussion, we're hoping to do a separate line item on the sewer cleaning, work, where they will actually help us out there, because they use a vector to vector down on each side of the curb box. And then again, this information will have to be sent back to OHM for them to put in our complete inventory list that we will eventually have to send to Eagle. I certainly don't think it's gonna take, anywhere not near $100,000. There is gonna be an added expense to have the contractor do the work, and help with us being there to just double check that what line material it actually is. And then, so without knowing exactly how many lines and what that line item cost is gonna be, and the fact that we thought originally OHM was gonna be helping with, creating some documents and whatnot to facilitate this work. The number is a little on the high end. I'm hoping to be,
Well,
you
that
know,
comes down before we adopt the budget.
then we'll know. I mean, they are working very hard right now to figure out exactly how many lines as part of the work that you guys approved already. So the further that they get into that information, the quicker we're gonna know exactly how many lines need to be identified.
We might be able to refine this.
It's possible.
Yeah, if you could
Yes.
refine this a little bit.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. And then $130,000 for utility department vehicles. I know we just purchased a truck and a plow. Can you talk about the 130,000 for this year? What's the need?
Yep, so that will be split between water and sewer. I'm hoping, well, these trucks will need less outfitting. The quotes came in at 51,000 for the 2,500. That was the same truck that we already bought, but we outfitted it with a plow, which made it go way higher. We won't need to do that with the newer 2,500, so that one should be around 55,000 out the door. The other truck that I proposed was a 2024 Elevation, the same truck that Parks currently has. I did a vehicle breakdown. So basically, we will have eight vehicles in total. However, the old van that was replaced last year will be traded in to go towards the cost of one of the new trucks. The F-250 that Rich just got upgraded to the 2024 GMC will be used by Kevin primarily to gather anything that he needs to at stores or whatever to complete work in here. Also, part of the proposed thing that that me and Joyce are working on is taking care of the mowing in-house for him to travel to the fire station and our outbuildings. He'll be required to have access to a truck, outside of a utility truck or parks truck.
So that'll be sort of transferred to buildings and grounds.
Yes, for him to use whenever he needs it. He does often make trips to Menards, Home Depot to gather things, to fix things here at our outbuildings. And definitely at least a couple times a week, he'll be using it to transport a trailer and the mower, assuming that we go that route, to our outbuildings and to the fire station to maintain the grounds there. That would leave us with 6 vehicles, 5 current staff, with Kevin being one of them, and then 1 being hired to replace our previous field tech. So 1 vehicle for each person, including myself. So the 20 or the 1,500 that I'm proposing would be mainly for me. It's as a utility director truck. Primarily be used to complete work orders when needed. I just did one today to help out staff, respond to certain customer complaints in the field, help field workers with certain tasks. I'm sometimes called out to look at something or assist with something. Currently, we had a water tower issue that I needed to get to. I had to use my personal vehicle for. We had the valve gasket that blew that I had to go out there and respond to. And I'm far more proactive in my view of going to construction sites that are doing water and sewer work and making my presence known, making sure I get my eyes on things that are going in the field. I do that quite often. And I know we got a lot of projects coming here. So the more that I can get out in the field, know the surrounding area better, know where certain utilities are, keep an eye on contractors and let them know that that I'm watching and keep an eye on things that are going on, the better. And that is certainly a utility director vehicle is very, very common in all townships and cities for that person to have access to a vehicle to handle different things.
But you would all share as needed.
Yes, yeah, again, this is also a redundant vehicle too, so, right now, we would have 1 vehicle for each person. If something broke down, I can give my utility truck to that person until that vehicle is repaired. Currently, the new van will be sent in here pretty soon to get the rear bumper replaced and a few other things. That is gonna limit us to less vehicles, which is gonna limit the amount of work that we need to get done. And so by having a utility director vehicle, as a redundant vehicle in case something happens, it is crucial to, maintaining the system.
That makes sense. I just want to know, you're talking about 6 vehicles for utilities. We have 4 people in utilities right now. 1 vacancy and 1 additional position requested. Is that correct?
We have me, Rich, Matt, Dave, and 1 more. The 6th vehicle is Kevin. So we'd have 6 vehicles, 5 for utility sewer,
5 for utilities.
1 for building maintenance.
5 for utilities.
And
Okay.
That's being proposed.
Okay.
What are the vehicles again? We have an F-250.
We have a 2006 F-250 that we just basically upgraded to a 2024 GMC for Rich. So we have that vehicle. We have a 2016 F-150 that Dave uses. We have a 2023 Ford van. And then we have, I don't know what the age of the old van is, but that one's gonna be traded in with approval of a purchase of additional vehicle in April.
So the vehicle that you would need would not have to be that big. Because with the F-250 makes sense when you're hauling, but you wouldn't need a F-250 just to.
No, so I still recommend a 1500 with 4-wheel drive. We do work off-road. We drive through winter. I actually wouldn't have recommended the new van that we bought because it's not 4-wheel drive. And we got stuck a couple times this year already, but we have it and it is a nice vehicle. It's just not 4-wheel drive. I wouldn't recommend for utilities, anything that wasn't four-wheel drive.
Right. We're living in a ground world.
Mhm.
Further questions? A couple things that just caught my eye. So, this is on page 80. Office supplies sort of jumped. Is there a reason?
Respectful of Joyce, because Joyce, you had is there
Oh.
something special, Joyce, you had to do at 10 o'clock or something? I don't want to prevent you from.
Well, I had suggested 10 o'clock because the staff will have to get up pretty early to be back tomorrow morning. So that was the reason I had made the request.
Oh, okay. I mean, if you're okay to.
Yeah,
We got one more. I think we only got one more to go. I just want to be,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
want to be respectful of your request.
Okay.
So office supplies, this is on 590000726. I just wondered why it jumped so much. Is that,
Yeah, good question. You can get back to us. if you want
I
to.
think, yeah, I think I need to double look at that. That might be something that I accidentally put in a little bit too much for. And I think it's something that I definitely need to look at.
furniture?
I just looked at my notes. It was a recommendation from Chris for tablets. I
Okay, that's
think
what
there
we're-
was a request
okay.
for tablets, so
So
that's where that
computers.
number is.
What
It's,
What's the fund again?
For the tablets for the GIS.
Yes.
It's computers, that's why it's.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're looking at probably more than likely an iPad tablet with data so that GIS can be accessed out in the field. This is gonna help with missed digs
For each.
for each person. So probably for Rich and the 3 field techs. I don't see a point for me having it. I can always just look at theirs when I go out in the field with them if they have an issue.
By the way, Brandon, there's companies that make thing called tough books. So they're they're rugged. You can drop, they're like 10 G-force. You can throw the thing, step on it, jump on it. I don't know if I'd recommend iPads. You might recommend doing that.
Yeah,
Fire
I'm
department
gonna
has
definitely.
They have something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna leave, my expertise, I'll just leave that up to Chris on what he recommends that will be efficient
An
enough.
iPad-like thing. I think.
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool. That's it. Tablet. That's all the questions I got.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, if you could just refine the CIP a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money in both of these funds, a lot, and we're looking at raising rates. I'm not happy with that
Well,
because
that's part of the analysis I think
Okay.
PM is doing,
Right.
looking at fund
So-
balance and capital needs.
Also, they haven't been adjusted since 2014. We want to see where the rates should be compared to what work we are doing. And right now, our funds are relying heavily on the development. The development's happening, all the permit tap fees that are being paid is heavily supporting the fund. And that's not always going to happen. So if we don't raise the rates slowly to offset that, when those do fall off, we don't want to be left with like a $30, rate increase so that we can maintain our system. We gotta slowly wean ourselves off of relying on the development funds and the permit fees so that, we
Yeah.
don't,
Okay, they were
Yeah.
raised in 2019.
The fees.
Oh, not the.
ready to serve fees,
Yeah,
most weren't
yeah,
updated
that's
since
what-
2014.
But for the
water
rates,
usage.
and excuse me,
Yeah.
you're right, the rates were a little bit, but that was just the Ann Arbor pass-through. I mean, Brandon's absolutely right, we've been using one-time revenue for ongoing operating costs, and that's never sustainable.
Yeah, I know.
Should we talk about water as well? I mean, we've sort of
I'm done
talked
with
about.
water.
We talked about both.
We
Talk
talked
about
about both, but,
Yeah.
so there's an item on, I just wanted to make sure I understood. Your page 83 for, rent income, is this the water tower? Rent?
I believe that's what was discussed. Yes, this is the AT&T amount that, actually Donna just handed this to me. I think it was just recently renegotiated in 2021 or 2022.
Yeah.
2022, I think.
Okay, so that is the amount that we get from AT&T for renting out the top of our tower.
So did it get automatically in that line? It looks like it jumped a little bit. Is that just a?
I think we did an inflation thing. Maybe it's not needed, seeing as how it's already agreed upon a certain amount.
Put an inflation on that.
We could try to get with AT&T already.
Unless it's in the lease, I
I
don't
got a
know.
feeling AT&T's got a really good contract.
Yeah.
I had a.
So we may want
for
her, we may want her to find that.
Let's keep going. We're almost there.
Yes, yeah.
Special assessment fund for the next one?
The meter supplies, I had a question. This is on page 84.
So the actual meter supply fund,
Yeah, so 591,000,726.600. I just want to make sure I understand this, because I thought we were talking about an ambitious plan for replacing meters. Is this where we?
in the CIP plan, it's being asked that we allocate 200 from water and 200 from sewer. The meter supply fund at this point in time, but it used to be used to buy meters and the connection pieces, the flanges and the meter connectors. So I left 20 grand in here alone for flanges and for buying the meter connectors.
So the meters themselves are in a different line.
They're in the capital improvement plan.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Shouldn't that be reflected in actual living budget?
It is in the capital outlay, Donna. If you look at that last account number,
There's
972.
another page.
That's why the 710,000 is there for capital.
Yeah, so any and all
That's the plan
capital
rolled up.
improvement plans that you guys approve, that me and Joyce will be bringing to you, will assign to that GL number.
Okay, it's just a little hard to know, because it's all aggregated.
Yes, yep.
It's just year one of this is what.
Once we go through the CIP with you, I could, we can explain the 710 for, yeah.
CIP, and the CIP we'll talk about at the March 5th. I would like to suggest that we also talk about the special assessment funds then and not get into that this evening. Is that acceptable? Can we move on now to public comment?
Yeah,
or-
can I just say, it's a quick comment on the special assessment fund, because Ally, I just want to have it on her to-do list if needed. Is that, township-wide fund 806 that you have in here, Ally? With a recommended budget going forward. This is the township-wide road assessment that has been refunded. Once the accounting is done, this should all be zeroed out. And I would recommend, Joyce, I don't even know that it needs to be in the 24-25 budget. Okay, I'll talk with Ally. All right, thank you.
Well, Joyce, I have one kind of general comment that none of it was discussed here. I've never been to, I'm a neophyte to this type of meetings, but I've been to several budget meetings in my lifetime. And the thing we never talked about, I just quite don't understand, is why we never talked about the goals and the performance objectives on each category. That one's like a head scratcher to me. And then moreover, as I look at these goals, we say performance measures, other than the DDA, and I saw one other one that had a metric of I want to achieve something. There was nothing that I could see that was measurable. So I mean, how do I know these things got done or what's going to get done? Say I'm going to work real hard. Okay, how do I even measure that? Right? I mean, so what I'd like to see, if they can, is I go back to each department and challenge them and say, wait a minute, guys or girls or whoever person.
Might even employ women.
Right? I did.
Like, possibly, I don't know.
I did.
Throwing it out there. Come on.
I call all three, it's a man, woman, person. I try to get all three.
Let's get to the point.
The point is, there should be something in here that says that we can measure. You said these things you're going to accomplish. Here's how we're going to measure whether you accomplish that goal. So this time next year, when there's a new board, they go, all right, how'd you do?
Yeah.
Right? So when you come back to ask for more money, we're gonna go, well, wait a second. You didn't accomplish what you told me you're gonna do in the last money that we gave you. Why should I give you more?
Yeah.
So I never want to solve a problem by, that's big government. I'm gonna solve a problem by throwing more money at it. Right? Quick anecdote, we brought in a CEO that's way smarter than me, way better than me, my replacement. He did a reduction in staff on our development by 37%. and we actually got 42% more productivity. It was an eye-opening experience. So, all about OKRs, objectives and key results, measuring everybody what they do, and you'd be surprised. That's my feedback in general on the whole.
I agree with you.
Not everything could be that. There's some things that are just hard funds.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, Mark, it's not completed when we submitted the budget, but as you recall, we did our strategic planning process with priorities. And so what I'm doing right now is pulling that information together, and it will be incorporated as part of this process so that we will have goals, priorities, timeframes, and getting certain things accomplished. So that's going to come to the board hopefully before we adopt the budget or before the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, and I do want to prelude this by understanding, first of all, you get this done way ahead of anybody's ever done in the history of Scio Township. So awesome job there, man. And it's a great first draft. I mean, you got to start somewhere. So I don't misconstrue my comment as criticism, it's feedback.
No,
right?
I agree with you. I do agree with you.
And it takes a couple years to get to performance-based budgeting, for sure.
Yeah, and it's all a journey.
Shall we move to public comment then? Are there any people present who would like to comment? You have up to 3 minutes.
Thanks for discussing, especially asking some really good questions. It was sad we didn't get to see like a formal resolution or anything to wish Anna well, but as far as Anna's appointment ending in the near future, but did wish her well personally, but thanks guys.
I need to turn the timer on for Brian. Mr. Apple, he's always on time.
Do we have people participating remotely who would like to comment?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you did. You're not gonna say it.
Rob Radisson, go ahead.
I'll tell Ryan about it.
I think you're missing a enormous resource and a person of expertise. And Chris Chang has decades of experience as a planner for Ann Arbor, and he has years and years of outstanding involvement with the Planning Commission. He knows a lot about planning, specifically in Scio Township with his experience. And he's come in as the project manager, and only 5% of his time is going to be applied to planning. That doesn't make any sense. And a couple of years ago when we started, or even more than that now, when we started talking about having a project manager, one of the primary duties of that objective was to have someone helping the Planning Commission with the enormous amount of projects that are coming through. It seems to me a massive mistake to lose out on Chris Chang's expertise. I think you really need to readdress how Chris is used in the township. He's an outstanding addition to Scio Township, and we really need to make use of his expertise. Nowhere in the budget is OHM, Washtenaw Engineering, or Plant Moran, those are the only ones I can think of, mentioned in the budget. How are we budgeting for all the engineering that OHM is doing, all of the engineering and overseeing? And the same goes for Washtenaw Engineering. How are we budgeting for how we work with Plant Moran, having our finance director and all of that stuff going with them? $750,000 for an HVAC system for a building that size makes absolutely no sense. I understand Trustee Brazeau changing his position after talking about $43 a square foot. That works out to $750,000 for a 17,500 square foot building. But still, I can't get my head around that. Nearly, well, $750,000 to heat the building. That does not make sense. 500 or 5
Air conditioning too.
Okay, well, gee whiz, okay. 550 million, or no, I'm sorry, $5.5 million for Park Road. despite enormous opposition to Park Road a couple of years ago. Yes, there was, there were,
Thank you, Rob.
please let me continue.
Well, Rob, in fairness to everyone, it's 3 minutes for public comment. We already gave you an extended time during the earlier public comment. I would ask that you please respect the public comment time rules for everyone. Who else is
Thank
waiting
you
to
so
speak?
much.
Thank you, Rob.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, excuse me. Yeah, so to carry on with the suggestion of the 5%, I've never been in a situation where I could assign an employee 50%, 40%, 5%, and 5%. What you're really assigning them is 50, 40, 25, 25. Nobody can work at any meaningful level at 2 hours a week for anything. It's preparing for attending a 1 hour meeting a week and maybe a half hour of follow-up. 5% just doesn't make sense. Sorry, I just don't feel very great about the prospect. I think you're setting someone up for failure.
Oh, Chris.
Just been my observation. And as well, you know, there's not a lot of folks here tonight. I think everybody's been here for, you know, a few hours. We're all here in, you know, with the best interests of Scio Township at heart. And Will, you could let Rob talk for a couple of more minutes. Cutting him off like that's just rude. Just rude. Not that we haven't come to expect that from you, but it's just unnecessary. Unnecessary and rude. It's too bad. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Anyone else?
That's it.
Motion to
I
adjourn?
just had one quick answer. I just want to say to Rob, the PM gap is fully budgeted in 101, 191. We took great care to do that. OHM, Carlisle Wortman is budgeted throughout 101, 701, and 702, as well as 590 and 591, and you can distinguish between fee-based services and others. And to my knowledge, there's nothing in the budget here for Washington Engineering. Can you confirm that, Joyce?
I can confirm. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
support from Riser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thanks, George. 10:27.